Ethan Cole never imagined that saving a dog's life on a rain-soaked Chicago night would destroy everything he'd spent 2 years rebuilding. His fragile custody arrangement, his hard-won professional reputation, and the careful distance he'd maintained from anyone who could hurt him again. But when that dog turned out to belong to Victoria Hale, the city's most ruthless billionaire CEO, their lives collided in ways that would force both of them to choose between the safe walls they'd built and the terrifying possibility of something real. This is a story about two broken people who found each other in the worst possible circumstances, and the little girl who refused to let either of them run away from what they needed most. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city name so I can see how far this story travels. Now let's begin. The rain came down in sheets that October night, turning Chicago's riverwalk into a slick ribbon of concrete that reflected the blurred lights of downtown towers. Ethan Cole hunched his shoulders against the wind, one hand gripping his daughter's small fingers while the other held a dying phone flashlight that barely cut through the darkness. "Daddy, I'm tired." Maya's voice was small and defeated, the way it got when she was past exhausted and heading toward a full meltdown. "I know, baby. Just a few more minutes, okay? We have to find your backpack." Ethan tried to keep the frustration out of his voice. It wasn't Maya's fault that her SpongeBob backpack had somehow ended up down here during their after-school walk. It wasn't her fault that the backpack contained her homework folder, her lunchbox, and the stuffed elephant she couldn't sleep without. And it definitely wasn't her fault that Ethan couldn't afford to replace any of it right now. The budget was already stretched so thin it was transparent. Legal assistant work paid better than nothing, but it didn't pay enough for a man raising a 7-year-old alone in a city that seemed designed to bankrupt anyone without family money or trust funds. The apartment was too small. The daycare bills were too high. The child support payments from Jessica had stopped coming 6 months ago, right around the time she'd moved to Seattle with her new boyfriend and decided that being a mother from 2,000 miles away was easier than actually showing up. "There it is!" Maya pointed toward a dark shape wedged against the riverwalk railing. Ethan's flashlight beam found the familiar cartoon face of SpongeBob, rain-soaked but intact. Relief washed through him as he grabbed it, checking inside to make sure everything was still there. Homework folder, check. Lunchbox, check. Mr. Trunk the Elephant, check. That's when he heard the bark. It wasn't a friendly bark. It was high-pitched, terrified, the sound of an animal in serious trouble. Ethan turned toward the sound, and his blood went cold. About 30 yards down the riverwalk, illuminated by the glow of a streetlight, a golden retriever was struggling near the edge of the walkway. The dog's leash was tangled around one of the metal bike racks, and it was pulling frantically, trying to get free. Every desperate lunge brought it closer to the 3-foot drop into the churning river below. "Stay right here," Ethan told Maya, setting the backpack down. "Don't move." He ran toward the dog, his shoes splashing through puddles as thunder cracked overhead. The golden retriever saw him coming and panicked harder, its paws scrabbling for purchase on the wet concrete. "Easy, easy," Ethan said, keeping his voice low and calm even though his heart was hammering. "Nobody's gonna hurt you." The dog whimpered, still pulling against the tangled leash. Ethan could see the problem now. The leash had wrapped around the bike rack in a complicated knot, and the dog's frantic movements were only making it worse. If the animal pulled any harder, the rack would tip, or the leash would break. And either way, the dog would end up in the river. Ethan dropped to his knees, ignoring the cold water that immediately soaked through his jeans. His fingers worked at the knot, trying to find the right loop to pull. The dog was panting hard, its eyes rolling white with fear. "Almost got it," Ethan muttered. "Just hold still for one more second." That's when he heard the car. The engine roar came from up on the street level, followed by the screech of tires losing traction on wet pavement. Ethan's head snapped up in time to see headlights swing wildly through the darkness, way too fast, heading straight for the ramp that led down to the riverwalk. The car was going to jump the curb. It was going to lose control completely, and it was headed right for them. Ethan didn't think. He yanked hard on the leash knot, felt it give, and grabbed the dog around its middle. The golden retriever was heavy, at least 70 pounds, but adrenaline made it possible to lift as Ethan threw himself backward, rolling away from his bike rack just as the car's front tire clipped it with a metallic screech that sent sparks flying into the rain. The car fishtailed, missed them by inches, and slammed into the concrete barrier at the end of the walkway with a sickening crunch. The engine died. The headlights flickered and went dark. For a long moment, Ethan just lay there on the wet concrete, arms wrapped around a shaking golden retriever, trying to remember how to breathe. His ribs hurt where the dog's elbow had caught him. His shoulder screamed from where he'd hit the ground. But he was alive. The dog was alive. Daddy! Eats. Maya's scream brought him back to reality. She was running toward him, her face streaked with tears. I'm okay, Ethan managed, sitting up carefully. I'm okay, baby. Everything's fine. Maya crashed into him, and Ethan wrapped one arm around her while keeping his other hand on the dog's collar. The golden retriever had stopped struggling and was now pressed against Ethan's chest, trembling but quiet. You scared me, Maya sobbed into his wet jacket. I know. I'm sorry. Ethan pressed a kiss to the top of her head, then looked toward the crashed car. The driver's door was opening. Stay behind me. A woman emerged from the vehicle, moving like someone who'd just survived something terrible and wasn't quite sure it had really happened. She was tall, dressed in clothes that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent. A tailored coat now splattered with rain, designer heels that were completely wrong for this weather. Even in the dim light from the distant street lamps, Ethan could see that she was beautiful in that particular way that wealthy people manage to be. All sharp angles and perfect posture. She took 2 steps toward them, then stopped, staring at the golden retriever in Ethan's arms. Max, she whispered. The dog's ears perked up. Its tail gave a tentative wag. The woman moved forward again, faster now, and dropped to her knees on the wet concrete without seeming to notice or care about her expensive clothes. Her hands reached for the dog, and Ethan carefully released his hold, letting the animal scramble over to her. Max, oh my God, Max! She buried her face in the dog's wet fur, and Ethan heard something in her voice crack completely. Not just relief. Something deeper. Something that sounded like the kind of desperation that came from having already lost too much and barely surviving it. The dog licked her face, whining softly, and the woman made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. Ethan slowly got to his feet, keeping Maya close. His shoulder was definitely going to bruise, possibly his ribs too, but he'd had worse. Are you hurt? He asked the woman. She looked up at him, and for the first time their eyes actually met. Hers were dark, brown or maybe dark gray, hard to tell in this light. And currently wet with tears, she didn't seem to realize she was crying. What? She blinked like she was coming out of a trance. No, I'm fine. The airbag... She gestured vaguely at her car. Is he okay? Is Max okay? I think so, Ethan said. Scared? Probably bruised, but nothing's broken as far as I can tell. You should get him to a vet to be sure. Right, yes, of course. The woman stood up, still holding onto Max's collar like she was afraid he'd disappear if she let go. She looked at Ethan more carefully now, taking in his soaked clothes, the way he was standing with one arm around Maya, the backpack lying forgotten on the ground nearby. You saved him. Anyone would have done the same thing. No. Her voice was flat, certain. They wouldn't have. Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he just shrugged, which made his shoulder hurt worse. The woman was still staring at him, something strange crossing her face. Not quite recognition, but close to it. Like she was trying to solve a puzzle she hadn't realized existed until this moment. You're hurt, she said. It's nothing, just bruised. You threw yourself in front of a car for a dog you'd never met. She said it like she was testing the words, trying to understand how that sentence could be true. While protecting your daughter. Maya had stopped crying now and was peeking out from behind Ethan's leg, studying this strange woman with the frank curiosity of a 7-year-old. Your dog needed help, Ethan said simply. So I helped, boss. The woman opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Whatever she'd been about to say got interrupted by the sound of sirens in the distance. Someone must have called 911 about the crash. I need to go, the woman said abruptly. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a business card, which was somehow still pristine despite everything that had just happened. She pressed it into Ethan's hand. If you need anything, medical bills, compensation for your clothes, anything at all, call that number, please. Ethan glanced down at the card. The logo was embossed, expensive, Hale Dynamics. Below that, a name, Victoria Hale, Chief Executive Officer. He looked back up, but Victoria was already moving, leading Max toward her wrecked car to grab something from the back seat. The sirens were getting closer. Red and blue lights were starting to paint the wet concrete in alternating colors. "Come on, Maya," Ethan said quietly. "Let's go home." He picked up the backpack with his good arm and took Maya's hand with the other. As they walked away from the scene, Maya looked back over her shoulder. "Daddy? Yeah, baby?" That lady was crying. "I know. Do you think Max is her only friend?" Ethan glanced back too. Victoria Hale was talking to a police officer now, her posture perfect again, her voice probably cool and controlled. But he remembered the sound she'd made when she'd buried her face in Max's fur, the kind of desperate relief that came from someone who'd been absolutely certain they were about to lose the only thing they had left to lose. "Maybe," he told Maya. "Sometimes people like that don't have as many friends as you'd think." They took the stairs back up to street level, leaving the riverwalk behind. Ethan's shoulder throbbed with every step. His clothes were soaked through, and the October wind cut right through the wet fabric. Maya was shivering beside him. But they had the backpack. They had each other. And tomorrow Ethan would go to work and Maya would go to school. And life would continue in the same exhausting pattern it had followed for the past 2 years. He threw Victoria Hale's business card in the trash on the way to the bus stop. Well, the morning came too early, the way it always did. Ethan's alarm went off at 5:30, dragging him out of dreams that he immediately forgot. His shoulder hurt worse than it had the night before. That was normal. The second day was always worse. And when he tried to stretch the stiffness out, his ribs protested sharply enough to make him wince. He made himself get up anyway. Maya needed to be awake by 6:15 if they were going to make the daycare bus, which meant Ethan needed breakfast ready by 6:30 and himself showered and dressed by 6:45. The morning routine was a carefully choreographed dance with no room for delays. By 7:30, Maya was on the bus, and Ethan was walking toward the Red Line station, a travel mug of terrible instant coffee in one hand and his laptop bag in the other. The bruises on his shoulder had darkened overnight, spreading down his arm in shades of purple and green. He'd covered them with a long-sleeve shirt and tried not to move in ways that would make him grimace visibly. His phone buzzed with the text from his boss. "Running late. Meeting pushed to 10. Can you handle the Hale Dynamics intake alone?" Ethan stared at the message for a second, something cold and strange settling in his stomach at those 2 words. Hale Dynamics. It was a coincidence. Had to be. Chicago had thousands of companies. The odds that he'd be assigned to do intake work for the same company whose CEO he'd met last night were astronomical. He texted back, "No problem. See you at 10. The law firm where Ethan worked, Morrison, Chen, and Associates, wasn't the kind of place that handled celebrity divorces or high-profile criminal cases. They did corporate contract work mostly. Document review, compliance audits, merger preparation. The kind of law that was 90% paperwork and 10% meetings where people argued about clauses that normal humans would never read. Ethan wasn't a lawyer. He'd gone to law school, passed the Illinois bar on his first try, and then discovered that being a newly minted attorney with a pregnant girlfriend and no family money meant taking whatever job would pay the bills fastest. Legal assistant work had been supposed to be temporary. That was 5 years ago. Now Jessica was in Seattle, Maya was 7 years old, and Ethan was still reviewing contracts for $42,000 a year. He arrived at the Morrison building at 8:40, grabbed a second coffee from the break room, and settled into his cubicle to prep for the intake meeting. The file was already on his desk. Hale Dynamics was bringing them in for temporary consulting work related to a major merger. The meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock in conference room B. Ethan opened the file and started reading. Hale Dynamics specialized in artificial intelligence and automation technology. The company had been founded 8 years ago and had grown aggressively since then, now valued at somewhere north of $3 billion. The merger in question involved acquiring a smaller competitor for $200 million in cash and stock. The CEO's name was listed at the top of the contact sheet, Victoria Hale. Ethan's coffee suddenly tasted like metal. It was still probably a coincidence. CEOs didn't show up to intake meetings with outside legal consultants. That's what lawyers and executives were for. Victoria Hale had probably already forgotten about last night. She'd been in shock from the accident, emotional about her dog, and now she was back to running her empire while Ethan processed paperwork in a 4th-floor cubicle. He told himself that all the way up until 9 o'clock, When he walked into conference room B with his laptop and his intake forms and found Victoria Hale sitting at the head of the table, she looked different in daylight, in her element. The woman who'd knelt in the rain crying into her dog's fur was gone, replaced by someone who looked like she'd been assembled in a factory that manufactured people designed to intimidate. Her suit was charcoal gray and probably cost more than Ethan's car. Her dark hair was pulled back in a style that was elegant and severe at the same time, and her eyes, the same eyes that had been wet with tears 12 hours ago, were now cool and evaluating as they swept across the room. Those eyes landed on Ethan and stopped. For a moment, neither of them moved. Victoria's expression flickered. Surprise? Recognition? Something else that Ethan couldn't identify. And then smoothed back into professional neutrality so quickly he almost thought he'd imagined it. Mr. Cole, her voice was controlled. Perfect. I was told Anthony Morrison would be handling our intake. He's running late, Ethan managed. His voice sounded mostly normal, which was impressive considering his heart was trying to punch its way out of his chest. I'll be covering until he arrives. If you'd prefer to wait— No. Victoria cut him off, not rudely, but with the kind of finality that suggested she was used to her words-ending conversations. Let's proceed. She gestured to the two people sitting on either side of her. This is David Chen, our chief legal counsel, and Sandra Park, VP of Operations. They'll be your primary contacts throughout this process. Ethan nodded at them both, then took the seat across from Victoria and opened his laptop. His hands were steady. That was good. He could do this. It was just a meeting, just a job. I've reviewed the preliminary materials, he said, falling into the professional patter that he'd done 100 times before. The merger structure looks straightforward, but I'll need to see the full term sheet before we can start the compliance review. There are also some questions about the IP transfer protocols. How's your shoulder? Victoria's question cut through his prepared speech like a knife. David and Sandra both looked confused. Ethan met Victoria's eyes. There was something there now, underneath the cool professional mask. Something that looked almost like concern. Fine, he said. Bruised, but fine. You should have gone to a hospital. I've had worse. That's not the point. David cleared his throat. I'm sorry. Do you two know each other? We met briefly last night, Victoria said, her tone making it clear that the subject was now closed. Mr. Cole assisted me with a personal matter. Now, the IP transfer protocols you mentioned. What specifically concerns you? Just like that, they were back to business. For the next 40 minutes, Ethan walked through the intake checklist, asked questions, took notes, and pretended that this was a normal client meeting and not the most surreal professional experience of his life. Victoria was sharp, frighteningly so. Every question Ethan asked, she either answered immediately or directed to whichever member of her team had the relevant expertise. She didn't waste words. She didn't tolerate tangents. When David started to go off on a lengthy explanation about their AI patent portfolio, Victoria cut him off with a single raised hand and summarized the key points in 3 sentences. This was the woman the business press called the Ice Queen of Chicago Tech, the CEO who'd built a billion-dollar company before she turned 30, the executive who'd once fired an entire division during a quarterly earnings call because their numbers disappointed her. Ethan could see it now. The ruthless intelligence, the absolute control. The sense that Victoria Hale had calculated every possible outcome of every possible decision and chosen her path with mathematical precision. But he'd also seen her cry into her dog's fur in the rain. Anthony Morrison showed up at 9:45, bursting into the conference room with apologies about traffic and terrible parking. He took over the meeting with the kind of smooth professional charm that successful attorneys cultivated, and Ethan was relegated to taking notes and staying quiet. Victoria barely glanced at him for the rest of the meeting. When it ended, Morrison walked the Hale Dynamics team to the elevators, still talking, still charming. Ethan hung back, gathering his laptop and papers. Mr. Cole. He turned. Victoria had doubled back, leaving her team at the elevators with Morrison. She stood in the conference room doorway, her expression unreadable. Yes? I wanted to thank you again for last night. She paused, and for just a second the mask slipped and he saw something raw underneath. Max is at the vet now. Bruised ribs, some muscle strain, but nothing permanent. Because of you. I'm glad he's okay. You threw away my card. It wasn't a question. Ethan didn't bother lying. I did. Why? Because I didn't save your dog to get paid for it. Victoria studied him like he was a problem she couldn't solve. Most people would have kept it, called, asked for money. I'm not most people. No. Something shifted in her expression. You're not. The elevator chimed down the hall. David's voice called out, Ms. Hale? Coming? Victoria didn't move immediately. She looked at Ethan for another long moment, and he had the strangest feeling that she was trying to memorize his face. Morrison mentioned you'll be assigned to our account for the duration of the merger prep. That means we'll be working together quite a bit over the next few weeks. That's correct. Oopsie. Good. She said it with a finality that felt significant, though Ethan wasn't sure why. Then she turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the polished floor with perfect rhythm. Ethan stood there in the empty conference room, his shoulder throbbing, his mind racing, trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. The next 2 weeks fell into a pattern that Ethan simultaneously got used to and never quite believed was real. 3 days a week, someone from Hale Dynamics would come to Morrison's offices for merger prep meetings. Usually it was David Chen or Sandra Park, sometimes with a rotating cast of other executives. They'd sit in conference room B for hours, reviewing contracts and compliance documents while Ethan took notes and flagged potential issues. And once a week, every Thursday morning at 9, Victoria Hale herself would show up. Morrison always handled those meetings personally. Ethan's job was to sit quietly, take detailed notes, and occasionally be called on to pull up a specific document or reference an earlier conversation. He was furniture, professional wallpaper, except Victoria kept looking at him, not obviously, not in a way that anyone else would notice. But Ethan noticed. He'd be explaining something about intellectual property law, and he'd catch her watching him with that same analytical expression she'd worn in the rain, like he was a puzzle she couldn't quite figure out. It should have made him uncomfortable. It probably would have if he hadn't caught himself doing the exact same thing, because the more time Ethan spent in meetings with Victoria Hale, the more he saw the cracks in her perfect facade. Little moments when the mask would slip just for a second, and he'd catch a glimpse of something else underneath. Like the Thursday meeting where David presented a proposal for handling severance packages in the merger. It was standard corporate stuff. Some people would lose their jobs. Here's how we'll minimize the PR damage. Victoria listened to the whole presentation without comment, her face neutral. Then she said, "What's the average tenure of the affected employees?" David blinked. "I'm sorry?" "The people we're laying off. How long have they worked for the acquired company, on average?" "I don't have that number offhand." "Get it." Victoria's voice was sharp. "And I want individual profiles. Names, positions, years of service, family situations if available. If we're putting people out of work, I want to know exactly who they are." Morrison jumped in smoothly. "Ms. Hale, that level of detail isn't typically necessary for—" "I don't care what's typical." But Victoria cut him off without raising her voice. "Get me the profiles." After the meeting, Morrison grumbled to Ethan about clients who made everything harder than it needed to be. But Ethan thought about the way Victoria had said, if we're putting people out of work, I want to know exactly who they are. Like it mattered to her, like they weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. The Ice Queen of Chicago Tech, who supposedly cared about nothing except profit margins, wanted to know the names of the people her business decisions affected. Or the time Victoria's phone rang during a meeting and she glanced at the screen, then excused herself to take it in the hallway. Through the conference room's glass walls, Ethan watched her pace back and forth, talking on the phone with an expression that was tighter and more stressed than he'd ever seen her wear in a business context. When she came back, David asked if everything was okay. "Fine," Victoria said. Max's physical therapy appointment ran long. The vet wanted to discuss his progress. She said it like it was nothing. Like stepping out of a merger strategy meeting to talk about her dog's recovery was a completely normal and reasonable thing to do. And maybe for her it was. Ethan was starting to realize that Victoria Hale contained multitudes that the business press had never bothered to notice. Suck. The third week, everything changed. It was a Wednesday, not Victoria's usual Thursday, and she showed up without David or Sandra or any of the usual executive buffer. Just her, arriving 20 minutes early for a meeting that was supposed to be routine contract review. Morrison was in court all day. Ethan was the only one in the office. Ms. Hale. He stood up from his cubicle, trying not to look as surprised as he felt. I wasn't expecting you until 10. Ikare. Well, I know. I'm early. She looked different today. Still professional, still perfectly put together, but there was something off about her posture, a tightness around her eyes. Is there somewhere we could talk? Privately? Ethan's mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. Had he screwed up one of the documents? Missed something critical? Conference room B is open, he said. Perfect. He followed her down the hall, intensely aware of how empty the office was. Morrison's assistant wouldn't be in until 9:30. The other legal assistants were all at an off-site training. It was just the two of them, their footsteps echoing in the quiet space. Victoria closed the conference room door behind them and turned to face him. For a long moment, she just stood there, and Ethan realized with a start that she looked exhausted. Actually, truly tired in a way that expensive makeup couldn't quite hide. I need to ask you something, she said finally, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay. Do you have any experience with hostile takeover attempts? Ethan blinked. That was not what he'd expected. Some. I clerked for a firm that handled corporate defense work during law school. Why? Because I'm about to be in one. Victoria walked to the window, staring out at the Chicago skyline, like she was looking for answers in the buildings. There's a venture capital firm called North Shore Partners. They've been quietly buying up shares of Hale Dynamics for the past 6 months. As of yesterday, they own 11% of the company. That's just under the threshold for SEC disclosure, Ethan said. Exactly. Victoria turned back to face him. Which means they're being careful, strategic. They're planning something, and I need to know what it is before they make their move. Easy, tak. Have you talked to your board? Something bitter crossed Victoria's face. Half my board would love nothing more than to see me forced out. They hate that I'm young, they hate that I'm a woman, and they especially hate that I've made this company successful despite their best efforts to micromanage every decision I make. If North Shore offers them a deal that gets rid of me, they'll take it. Ethan processed that. What does your legal counsel say? David's brilliant at contract law, but he's never handled a hostile takeover. Neither has anyone else on my team. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was quieter. I need someone I can trust. Someone who doesn't have a personal stake in whether I stay or go. Someone who will tell me the truth even when I don't want to hear it. Why me? Because you threw yourself in front of a car to save my dog. Victoria said it like it was the most logical reason in the world. Because you threw away a business card that could have gotten you a favor from a billionaire. Because every time Morrison says something that's technically true but strategically stupid, I see you cringe even though you're too professional to correct him. Ethan didn't know what to say to that. I'm not asking you to quit your job, Victoria continued. I'm asking you to consult on this, quietly, off the books. I'll pay you whatever rate you want. I don't want your money. Everyone wants money, Mr. Cole. Not from you. The words came out harder than Ethan intended. Not for this. Victoria stared at him. Then why would you help me? Because you want to know the names of the people who'll lose their jobs in your merger. Ethan met her eyes. Because you rescheduled a strategy meeting to take your dog to physical therapy. Because I don't think you're the person everyone says you are. The silence stretched out between them, charged with something Ethan couldn't name. All right, Victoria said finally. Then help me because it's the right thing to do. Help me because North Shore Partners is run by a man named Gerald Vance, and if he takes over Hale Dynamics, the first thing he'll do is gut the R&D department and sell off the patents to the highest bidder. 300 people will lose their jobs, and 5 years of breakthrough AI research will end up owned by defense contractors. How do you know that? Because it's what he did to the last 2 companies he took over. Victoria's jaw tightened. Gerald Vance doesn't build things. He strips them for parts and sells them off. And I will burn my company to the ground before I let him do that to mine. There it was again, that flash of something raw and real underneath the perfect corporate exterior. Victoria Hale didn't just want to win this fight. She needed to. It was personal in a way that had nothing to do with money or power. Ethan thought about Maya, about the carefully balanced life he'd built for her, about how getting involved in a corporate war was exactly the kind of risk he couldn't afford to take. Then he thought about 300 people losing their jobs because some venture capitalist wanted to maximize his quarterly returns. "All right," he heard himself say, "I'll help." Victoria's shoulders sagged just slightly, like she'd been holding herself rigid and had finally allowed herself to relax. "Thank you. But I have conditions." Her eyebrows rose. "Such as?" "First, everything we do is legal and documented. No gray areas, no shortcuts. If we're fighting this, we're fighting it clean." "Agreed." "Second, I need complete transparency. No secrets, no holding back information because you think I can't handle it." "Done." "Third," Ethan hesitated, then made himself say it, "my daughter comes first, always. If this interferes with my custody schedule or puts her at risk in any way, I'm out immediately. Non-negotiable." Something shifted in Victoria's expression. "You have a daughter?" "She's 7. Her name is Maya." Ethan wasn't sure why he was telling her this. Her mother moved to Seattle last year. It's just the two of us now. "I saw her," Victoria said quietly. "That night on the riverwalk. She was hiding behind you while you untangled Max's leash. She thought you were sad." "I was." The admission hung in the air between them. Outside the conference room, Ethan heard the elevator chime. Morrison's assistant arriving. The office would fill up with people in the next 20 minutes. This moment of strange honesty would end, and they'd go back to being CEO and legal assistant. But right now, in this quiet room, they were just two people who'd met in the rain and somehow ended up trusting each other for reasons neither of them fully understood. "When do we start?" Ethan asked. Victoria pulled out her phone and typed something quickly. "I'm sending you an encrypted email address. Use it for all communication about this. I'll forward you everything I have on North Shore Partners tonight. We'll meet tomorrow evening to discuss strategy." "Not here and—" "No, somewhere private." She paused, considering. "Do you know Millennium Park? There's a coffee shop on the north end." "I know it. 7 o'clock tomorrow. Come alone." Victoria moved toward the door, then stopped and turned back. "Mr. Cole?" "Yes?" "Thank you for trusting me." "Thank you for asking," Ethan said. "Not many CEOs would." "I'm not most CEOs." "No," Ethan agreed, echoing her words from weeks ago. "You're not." Victoria smiled, a real smile, small and genuine and completely different from the polished corporate expression she usually wore. Then she opened the conference room door and stepped back into her role, shoulders squared, mask firmly in place. Ethan stood there for a moment after she left, wondering what he'd just agreed to, wondering if he'd made a terrible mistake, wondering why the thought of seeing Victoria tomorrow at 7 made something warm unfurl in his chest that had nothing to do with corporate takeovers or legal strategy. His phone buzzed. A text from the daycare. "Maya's running a slight fever. Nothing serious, but you might want to pick her up early today." Just like that, reality crashed back in. Ethan grabbed his laptop bag and headed for the door, already calculating whether he could leave early without Morrison noticing. Whether Maya's fever was the kind that meant a doctor's visit or just Tylenol and rest, whether they had enough sick days left in his PTO balance. The corporate warfare stuff would have to wait. His daughter needed him. It was the only priority that mattered. Maya's fever broke by morning, but Ethan kept her home from school anyway. She spent the day curled up on the couch watching cartoons while he worked from the kitchen table. His laptop balanced on a stack of Maya's coloring books because their apartment was too small for an actual desk. Between reviewing contracts for Morrison and fielding emails from anxious paralegals, Ethan found himself checking his phone every few minutes. Victoria had promised to send the North Shore Partners information, but so far nothing had come through. Maybe she'd changed her mind. Maybe she'd realized that trusting a $42,000 a year legal assistant with her company's survival was insane. The encrypted email arrived at 2:15 in the afternoon. Ethan opened it on his phone, read the first 3 lines, and immediately got up to close his laptop screen, even though Maya was across the room and couldn't see it anyway. His hands were shaking slightly. Victoria hadn't been exaggerating. North Shore Partners wasn't just circling Hale Dynamics. They were mounting a full-scale assault. The email contained financial documents, board communications, stock purchase records, and a leaked internal memo that outlined North Shore's exact strategy. They were planning to hit 15% ownership within the next month, then launch a proxy fight to replace Victoria and 3 of her allies on the board. The timeline was aggressive, the tactics were brutal, and the leaked memo made it clear that Gerald Vance had already lined up buyers for Hale Dynamics' most valuable patents before he'd even taken control of the company. Ethan read through everything twice, making notes, cross-referencing corporate governance laws he hadn't thought about since law school. By the time he looked up, it was after 5 and Maya was asleep on the couch, Mr. Trunk tucked under her chin. He had 2 hours before he was supposed to meet Victoria at Millennium Park. The problem was that he didn't have anyone to watch Maya. His usual babysitter was out of town. The neighbor who sometimes helped was working a night shift. And Ethan's parents had made it clear 2 years ago that if he insisted on keeping custody, instead of letting Jessica take Maya to Seattle, he was on his own. He could cancel. Text Victoria, explain the situation, reschedule for tomorrow. Except tomorrow was Thursday, which meant a full day of client meetings. Friday was worse. And based on the timeline in North Shore's documents, they didn't have time to waste. Ethan looked at Maya, still sleeping peacefully, her fever completely gone. Then he pulled out his phone and typed a message to Victoria's encrypted email. Need to bring my daughter to the meeting. No babysitter available. If that's a problem, we can reschedule. The response came back in less than a minute. Not a problem. See you at 7. Millennium Park, after dark in October, was cold and mostly empty. The tourists who crowded the Bean during summer were long gone, replaced by a few joggers and the occasional homeless person seeking shelter under the pavilion. The coffee shop Victoria had mentioned was a small place tucked into the northwest corner, the kind of spot that stayed open late for students and insomniacs. Ethan arrived at 6:50 with Maya's hand in his. She'd woken up around 6 feeling better and demanding dinner, so he'd fed her mac and cheese and told her they were going on a quick adventure. She'd accepted this with the easy trust of a 7-year-old who still believed her father could handle anything. Where are we going, Daddy? To meet someone for work. Is it boring work? Probably very boring, Ethan said, which was such a massive understatement it almost made him laugh. You can bring your tablet and watch something with headphones, okay? Okay. Maya squeezed his hand. Is the lady coming? What lady? The one with the dog, the sad one. Ethan stopped walking. How did you know that? Maya said. Maya gave him the look she reserved for when adults asked obvious questions. You keep checking your phone like you do when you're waiting to hear from someone, and you changed your shirt 3 times. You only do that when you're nervous about seeing someone. 7 years old and already reading him like a book. Ethan wasn't sure whether to be proud or terrified. Yeah, he admitted. She's coming. Good, Maya said firmly. I want to make sure Max is okay, and they found a table near the back of the coffee shop, and Ethan ordered hot chocolate for Maya and black coffee for himself that tasted like it had been sitting in the pot since morning. Maya settled in with her tablet and headphones, immediately absorbed in whatever cartoon she'd queued up. Victoria arrived at exactly 7 o'clock. She'd changed since this morning. The severe business suit was gone, replaced by jeans and a sweater that probably still cost more than Ethan's monthly rent, but at least looked like something a normal person might wear. Her hair was down instead of pulled back, and without the armor of her corporate wardrobe, she looked younger, closer to 30 than the ageless executive she became in boardrooms. She spotted Ethan and started toward their table, then stopped when she saw Maya. Hi, Maya said, pulling off her headphones. Is Max okay? Victoria blinked, clearly thrown. Yes, he's much better. Thank you for asking. Good. I was worried about him. Maya put her headphones back on and returned to her tablet like that settled everything. Victoria slid into the seat across from Ethan, her expression somewhere between amused and bewildered. She remembers Max? She's been asking about him for 3 weeks, Ethan said. Apparently, I'm supposed to find out if his physical therapy is helping and whether he's allowed to run yet. He's allowed short walks, Victoria said, directing the answer to Maya, even though Maya couldn't hear her through the headphones. The vet says another month before he can really run again. I'll tell her, Ethan said. She'll want a full report. They sat there for a moment in slightly awkward silence. This was different from their conference room interactions, stripped of the professional buffer that usually kept things at a safe distance. Here, in this quiet coffee shop with Maya 3 feet away, they were just two people trying to figure out how to talk to each other. I read everything you sent, Ethan said finally. It's worse than you described. I know. Vance has already pre-sold your AI patents to 3 different defense contractors. He's not planning a hostile takeover. He's planning a liquidation. I know, Victoria said again, and Ethan heard the exhaustion underneath the words. The question is what I can do about it. Ethan pulled out a notebook, actual paper, because he didn't trust encrypted apps not to have backdoors. You have options, but none of them are great. The cleanest defense would be a poison pill provision, but that requires board approval, and you said half your board wants you gone. At least half, Victoria corrected. Maybe more, so then we need to go around them. Illinois corporate law allows CEOs to implement certain defensive measures without board approval in cases of imminent threat. You'd have to prove that North Shore's actions constitute bad faith acquisition with intent to harm the company, but based on these documents, he tapped the notebook. I think we can make that case. What kind of defensive measures? Accelerated vesting schedules for employee stock options, making the company less attractive to acquire. Strategic debt issuance to reduce available cash. And my personal favorite, a crown jewel defense where you sell or license the AI patents to a third party before Vance can get his hands on them. Victoria leaned forward, her eyes sharp with interest. You're talking about controlled demolition, making the company useless to North Shore without destroying it completely. Yes. Uai eats. Exactly. You can't stop Vance from buying stock, but you can make sure there's nothing valuable left when he gets control. Ethan paused. The problem is that all of these strategies require time to implement, and based on North Shore's timeline, you've got maybe 3 weeks before they make their move. 3 weeks? Victoria repeated. To save a company I spent 8 years building. I didn't say it would be easy. No, you said it would be impossible. But she was smiling slightly when she said it, and Ethan realized it was the same smile she'd given him in the conference room. Small, genuine, completely unlike her corporate mask. That's why I need you. Everyone else keeps telling me what I want to hear. You're the only one who tells me the truth. The truth is that this is going to get ugly, Ethan said. When you start implementing defensive measures, Vance will escalate. He'll go to the press, he'll sue, he'll try to paint you as a desperate CEO, destroying her own company to stay in power. Let him try. He'll come after everyone around you, David, Sandra, anyone else on your team who's helping you fight this. Ethan met her eyes. He'll come after me too, if he finds out I'm involved. I know. Victoria's voice was quiet. If you want out, stand. This isn't your fight. I didn't say I wanted out. Ethan glanced at Maya, still absorbed in her cartoon, then back at Victoria. But I need you to understand something. I've already lost everything once. My marriage, my career, almost lost custody of my daughter. I barely survived it. So if we're doing this, I need to know that you're committed, that you won't change your mind halfway through when things get hard. Which, Mama eats. I won't. How can you be sure? Because I've lost everything before too. Victoria said it matter-of-factly, but Ethan heard the weight behind the words. 4 years ago, I had a partner, co-founder of Hale Dynamics. Brilliant engineer, better at the technical side than I ever was. We were going to build the company together. What happened? The board decided they didn't like having 2 CEOs. They made me choose, buy him out, or both of us get fired. So I chose. Victoria's jaw tightened. I chose the company, and Marcus walked away with his payout, and I never saw him again. Do you regret it? Every single day. She looked at Maya, and something in her expression softened. But I learned something important. Once you've sacrificed everything for something, you can't let it go, not without a fight. So no, Mr. Cole, I won't change my mind halfway through. This company is all I have left. Ethan wanted to tell her that wasn't true, that she had to have something else. Family, friends, a life outside of Hale Dynamics. But he looked at the way she sat, the careful control in every movement, and he understood. Victoria had built walls so high that nothing could get through them. Nothing except maybe a golden retriever who loved her unconditionally. All right, he said, then we fight. They spent the next hour mapping out strategy. Ethan took notes while Victoria outlined her company's structure, identified which board members might be persuadable, and listed every asset that Vance would consider valuable. She was sharp and focused, the exhaustion from earlier completely hidden as she shifted into combat mode. Maya fell asleep halfway through, her head pillowed on her arms, tablet still playing cartoons at low volume. She's beautiful, Victoria said quietly during a lull in the conversation. She has your eyes. She has her mother's stubbornness, Ethan said, which is probably a good thing. She'll need it. Does her mother see her often? Not really. Jessica moved to Seattle for her boyfriend's job. She sends birthday cards sometimes, calls every few months. Ethan kept his voice neutral, not wanting Maya to hear if she was faking sleep the way she sometimes did. Maya used to ask when Mommy was coming home. She doesn't ask anymore. That must be hard for both of you. We manage. It was the answer Ethan always gave when people asked about the divorce. We manage. We're fine. Everything's under control. The truth, that some nights he lay awake terrified he was screwing up Maya's entire life, that he had no idea if he was doing any of this right, wasn't something he shared with anyone. But Victoria was looking at him like she understood anyway. My father left when I was 8, she said. Just walked out one day. My mother told me he'd gone on a business trip and would be back soon. I believed her for almost a year before I realized he was never coming home. I'm sorry. Don't be. I survived it. Built a company worth $3 billion. Proved I didn't need him or anyone else. Victoria's smile was thin and bitter. That's what you do, right? Turn pain into power. Turn absence into ambition. Is it working, Shait? I'll let you know when I figure it out. They sat there in the quiet coffee shop, two people who'd survived abandonment in different ways, both still carrying scars they pretended didn't hurt. Ethan thought about reaching across the table, offering some gesture of comfort or connection. But before he could decide if that was appropriate or insane, his phone buzzed with a text. He glanced at the screen and felt his stomach drop. Problem? Victoria asked. My ex-wife. Ethan stared at the message, reading it twice to make sure he wasn't misunderstanding. She's filing a motion to modify our custody agreement. She wants Maya full-time. Can she do that? She can try. Ethan's mind was already racing through legal precedents, custody laws, the details of their divorce decree. We have joint legal custody, but I have primary physical custody. In order to change that, Jessica would need to prove that circumstances have materially changed, or that Maya's current situation is somehow harmful. What changed? I don't know. She barely talks to Maya, hasn't visited in almost a year, and now suddenly... He stopped, rereading the message one more time. The words were bland lawyer speak, but the subtext made his blood run cold. Recent reports suggest that Mr. Cole's living situation and professional conduct may not be in Maya's best interests. What recent reports? Ethan muttered. Victoria leaned forward. What does the message say exactly? He showed her, watching her face go hard. Recent reports, she repeated. Someone's been watching you, gathering information. But why would... Ethan stopped as understanding hit him like a freight train. North Shore. Probably. If Vance figured out you're helping me, going after your daughter would be the easiest way to make you back off. That's insane. We've had 2 meetings. How would he even know? Because I'm not the only one Vance has been investigating. Victoria pulled out her phone, typing rapidly. He's been building a file on everyone in my inner circle for months. If he saw us together at Morrison's office, saw me come to this coffee shop. She trailed off, her expression darkening. This is my fault. I should have been more careful. You didn't do anything wrong. I involved you in corporate warfare without considering the consequences. Victoria's voice was tight with anger, directed at herself, Ethan realized, not at him. Your ex-wife's lawyers didn't suddenly decide to file this motion out of nowhere. Someone contacted them, fed them information, probably offered to help fund the custody fight. Ethan felt sick. You're saying Vance is paying my ex-wife to take my daughter away from me? I'm saying he's giving her ammunition and encouragement. The rest she's doing herself. Why? What does he gain? You backing off. Victoria met his eyes. If you're fighting a custody battle, you won't have time to help me. And even if you try, I'd tell you to stop because I wouldn't want Maya caught in the crossfire. It's a clean solution from Vance's perspective. Minimal cost, maximum disruption. Ethan looked at Maya, still sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that her life was about to be turned upside down again. He thought about the tiny apartment they shared, the carefully balanced routine that made it possible for him to work and parent alone, the fragile stability they'd built over 2 years, all of it hanging by a thread that someone he'd never met had decided to cut for strategic purposes. I need to call my lawyer, he said. Do you have a good family law attorney? I have the guy who handled my divorce. He charges $200 an hour that I can't afford. I'll cover it. No. The word came out harder than Ethan intended. I'm not taking your money. This is happening because of me. This is happening because Gerald Vance is a sociopath who treats people like chess pieces. Ethan stood up, carefully lifting Maya into his arms. She mumbled something in her sleep and wrapped her arms around his neck. But I'm not going to let him win. Not with this. Not with her. Victoria stood too. What are you going to do, sis? Fight, same as you. Ethan adjusted Maya's weight, making sure she was secure against his shoulder. I'll figure out the custody thing. You focus on saving your company. We'll handle this separately. Ethan, I mean it, Victoria. I can't help you with North Shore if I'm worried about my daughter. And I can't fight for custody if I'm distracted by corporate strategy. He met her eyes. We need to step back from this. For both our sakes. I don't want to step back. The words hung in the air between them. Victoria looked almost surprised that she'd said them out loud. I don't want to step back, she said again, quieter this time. Because you're the only person who's treated me like a human being in 4 years. And walking away from that to protect yourself makes perfect sense, and I hate that it makes perfect sense. Ethan didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to explain that he felt the same way. That talking to Victoria in this coffee shop felt more real than anything else in his carefully controlled life, and walking away from it hurt in a way he didn't want to examine too closely. I have to protect Maya, he said finally. She comes first. I know, that's why I... Victoria stopped, seemed to reconsider whatever she'd been about to say. That's one of the things I respect most about you. I'm sorry. Don't be. You're making the right choice. Victoria pulled out her phone again. I'm going to send you something. Information about the best family law attorneys in Chicago. Not the ones who advertise on billboards, the ones who actually win cases. Most of them are expensive, but some do pro bono work or sliding scale fees. You don't have to... I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for her. Victoria glanced at Maya, and her expression softened in a way Ethan had only seen once before, that night in the rain. No 7-year-old should lose a parent because some billionaire wanted to win a business fight. If this is my fault, then I'm going to fix it, even if you don't want my help. Ethan's phone buzzed. The list had already arrived. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me yet. Just promise me you'll actually call one of them. Tonight, if possible. These custody motions move fast, and you need representation before Jessica's lawyers start building their case. I will. They stood there for another moment, neither quite ready to end the conversation. Around them, the coffee shop was emptying out as closing time approached. The barista was wiping down tables and giving them pointed looks. I should go, Ethan said. Get her home to bed. Right, of course. Victoria picked up her bag, hesitated, then said, For what it's worth, I think you're an incredible father. Maya's lucky to have you. You barely know us. I know enough. Victoria's smile was sad. I see the way she looks at you, like you're the whole world. That doesn't happen unless you've earned it. Ethan felt something crack in his chest, some wall he'd been holding in place for 2 years. She's everything to me. I know. That's why you'll win. Sis. Victoria walked away before Ethan could respond, her footsteps quick and purposeful as she headed for the exit. He watched her go, Maya still sleeping against his shoulder, trying to figure out how everything had gotten so complicated so fast. His phone buzzed again. Another encrypted email from Victoria, this one with a single line. If you change your mind about needing help, call me. Anytime, I mean it. Ethan stared at the message for a long time before finally deleting it. Not because he didn't believe her, but because keeping it felt dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with Gerald Vance or corporate takeovers. He carried Maya out into the October night, feeling the weight of her trust and the impossibility of the situation pressing down on him equally. Somewhere across the city, Victoria was probably already planning her next move against North Shore, and somewhere else, Jessica was working with lawyers to take Maya away. Ethan held his daughter tighter and started the long walk to the bus stop, trying not to think about how much he'd wanted to say yes when Victoria asked him to stay. The custody motion arrived via courier at 8:30 the next morning, right as Ethan was trying to get Maya ready for school. The official legal documents were even worse than the text message had suggested. Jessica wasn't just asking for custody. She was painting Ethan as an unfit parent. The filing claimed that Ethan's work schedule was unstable, that he frequently left Maya with unreliable babysitters, that his one-bedroom apartment was inadequate for a growing child. It mentioned the incident where Maya had been sick and Ethan had brought her to a work meeting. Somehow, Jessica's lawyers had found out about the coffee shop meeting with Victoria, though they didn't name Victoria specifically. Most damning was the final paragraph, which stated that Ethan had recently become involved with a romantic partner of significantly higher socioeconomic status, creating an unstable and potentially exploitative environment for Maya. Ethan read that line 3 times, feeling rage build in his chest. Romantic partner. They were characterizing his professional relationship with Victoria as some kind of sugar daddy arrangement, implying that he was using his daughter's welfare as leverage for personal gain. Daddy, you're making your angry face. Ethan looked up. Maya was standing in the kitchen doorway, still in her pajamas even though they were supposed to leave for school in 10 minutes. Sorry, baby. Just work stuff. He folded the papers and shoved them into his bag. Go get dressed, okay? We're running late. Are you mad at Mommy? The question hit him like a punch. What? No. Why would you think that? Because you always make that face when she calls. Maya's voice was matter-of-fact, but her eyes were worried. And now you're making it again. Ethan knelt down so they were eye level. I'm not mad at Mommy. I'm just dealing with some grown-up stuff that's complicated. But it has nothing to do with you, okay? You didn't do anything wrong. Okay. Maya didn't look convinced, but she headed back to her room to get dressed. Ethan waited until he heard her door close, then pulled out his phone and dialed the first number on Victoria's list. A receptionist answered on the second ring. Law offices of Patricia Keene. Hi, my name is Ethan Cole. I need to schedule a consultation about a custody modification motion. Of course, Ms. Keene has an opening tomorrow at 3. Does that work for you? Ethan thought about his work schedule, the meetings he'd have to cancel, the excuses he'd have to make to Morrison. Yes, I'll be there. He spent the rest of the morning in a fog, getting Maya to school, commuting to the office, sitting through meetings without really hearing what anyone said. His mind kept circling back to the custody motion, picking apart every claim, trying to figure out how to fight back. Morrison pulled him aside around 11. You okay? You've been somewhere else all morning. Family emergency, Ethan said. Nothing I can't handle. We'll handle it fast. Hale Dynamics is expecting those merger compliance documents by end of day, and we're nowhere close to finished. Right, the Hale Dynamics contract work. The job that had brought him into Victoria's orbit and started this entire mess. Ethan buried himself in the documents, forcing his brain to focus on contract clauses and regulatory compliance instead of custody battles. It almost worked. He was deep into a section on intellectual property transfers when his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. Ethan Cole. Mr. Cole, this is David Chen from Hale Dynamics. We met a few weeks ago. I remember. What can I do for you, Mr. Chen? Actually, I'm calling on behalf of Ms. Hale. She wanted me to reach out about a potential full-time position with our company. Ethan's brain stuttered to a halt. I'm sorry, what? Brain. We're expanding our legal department in preparation for the merger. Ms. Hale suggested you might be interested in joining as senior corporate counsel. The salary would be substantially higher than your current position, and we offer excellent benefits including family health care and flexible scheduling. Yes, was. Mr. Chen, I appreciate the offer, but before you say no, let me send you the details. No pressure to decide immediately. Ms. Hale just wanted to make sure you were aware of the opportunity. Ethan closed his eyes, understanding exactly what was happening. This wasn't a job offer. This was Victoria trying to help him fight the custody battle by giving him ammunition to prove he had stable employment and better resources for Maya. It was thoughtful and generous and completely inappropriate. Tell Ms. Hale thank you, but I can't accept. May I ask why not? Because it would look exactly like what Jessica's lawyers are already claiming, that I'm leveraging my daughter's welfare for professional advancement. Ethan kept his voice level with effort. I appreciate Ms. Hale's concern, but I need to handle this on my own. There was a pause. I understand. I'll relay your response. Thank you. Ethan hung up and immediately sent a text to Victoria's encrypted number. Tell David I said no. Please don't try to help me like that again. The response came back fast. Understood. For what it's worth, the job offer was real. We do need senior counsel, and you're qualified. But I respect your decision. Another message followed seconds later. How's Maya? Ethan stared at the question, surprised by the directness of it. Victoria was asking about his daughter like it mattered to her. Like Maya was more than just collateral damage in a corporate war. He typed back, She's okay. Worried that I'm angry at her mother, trying to protect her from all of this. You're doing the right thing. She's lucky to have you. Ethan didn't respond to that. He shoved his phone in his pocket and went back to work, trying to ignore the way Victoria's words had lodged somewhere in his chest and refused to dislodge. The meeting with Patricia Keene the next day was brutal. She was a small woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude that Ethan appreciated immediately. She read through Jessica's custody motion while Ethan sat across from her desk, watching her expression get progressively grimmer. This is aggressive, she said finally. Your ex-wife's attorneys are going for the throat. Can they win? Depends. Walk me through your current situation, and I mean everything. Work schedule, living arrangements, childcare, any recent life changes that might have triggered this. Ethan spent the next 20 minutes laying out his life in clinical detail. The apartment that was small but clean, the daycare that was reliable but expensive, the work schedule that was demanding but manageable, the absence of any romantic relationships or major disruptions. Then he told her about Victoria. Not the attraction he was trying to ignore, not the late-night coffee shop meeting that had felt more like a date than strategy session. Just the facts. He'd helped a client's CEO with a personal emergency, they'd developed a professional friendship, and somehow that had been twisted into evidence of his unfitness as a parent. Patricia listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. Here's the situation, she said when he finished. Your ex-wife's case is thin. You have stable employment. Your daughter is thriving in school. There's no evidence of neglect or abuse, but they're banking on optics. Single father, struggling financially, suddenly associating with a billionaire CEO, they're going to paint you as either a gold digger or someone in over his head. I'm neither of those things. I know, but we need to prove it, which means we go on offense. Patricia flipped to a fresh page in her notepad. First, I'll file a response disputing every claim in their motion. Second, we gather evidence of Maya's well-being, teacher reports, medical records, statements from anyone who interacts with her regularly. Third, we investigate your ex-wife's motives. Because I guarantee she didn't wake up one day and spontaneously decide she wants custody after a year of barely calling. Why? You think someone's backing her financially? I think someone told her she could win and offered to help make it happen. The question is who and why. Patricia fixed Ethan with a sharp look. You said this billionaire CEO, Victoria Hale. Is she involved in anything that might attract negative attention? Corporate disputes, hostile takeovers, anything like that? Ethan thought about lying. About keeping Victoria's problems separate from his own, like he'd promised himself he would. Yes, he said instead. She's fighting a hostile takeover attempt, and the people trying to take her company might have identified me as someone close to her. How close? Professionally? We've known each other for 3 weeks. Personally? Ethan paused. I don't know how to answer that. Patricia's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes sharpened. Are you romantically involved with Victoria Hale? No. Do you want to be? That's not relevant to the custody case. It's absolutely relevant if opposing counsel plans to make it an issue. Patricia set down her pen. I'm not judging you, Mr. Cole. I'm trying to understand what we're up against. So I'll ask again. Do you have romantic feelings for Victoria Hale? Ethan thought about Victoria's smile in the coffee shop. The way she'd looked at Maya with something that might have been longing. The encrypted text asking if Maya was okay, like it genuinely mattered to her. I don't know, he said honestly. Maybe, probably, but I'm not acting on it. Good, keep it that way. Patricia made a note. Because if this custody fight goes to court, and you're in a relationship with someone worth billions, Jessica's lawyers will use it to paint you as unstable at best and manipulative at worst. Your best defense is maintaining clear professional boundaries. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you're already emotionally entangled with this woman, whether or not you're sleeping together. The bluntness of it made Ethan flinch. What do you want me to do? Cut off all contact? I want you to be realistic about the situation. Victoria Hale is a complication you can't afford right now. Your priority has to be Maya. Everything else is secondary. I know that. Uskits. Then act like it. Patricia's voice softened slightly. Look, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've seen good parents lose custody because they made stupid choices at critical moments. Don't be one of them. Ethan left the meeting feeling hollowed out and grimly determined. Patricia was right. He needed to focus on Maya, on building the strongest possible case for custody. Everything else could wait. He sent one final text to Victoria's encrypted number. I can't do this anymore. The custody fight has to be my priority. I'm sorry. Her response came an hour later. Don't apologize. You're making the right choice. If you need anything, references for the custody case, documentation of our professional relationship, anything, just ask. Ethan almost responded, almost told her that what he needed was to stop thinking about her, stop checking his phone, hoping for her messages, stop wanting something that would destroy the fragile stability of his life. Instead, he deleted the entire conversation thread and went to pick up Maya from school. She ran to him the way she always did, backpack bouncing, face bright with uncomplicated joy. Daddy, guess what happened in art class? Ethan scooped her up, breathing in the smell of her strawberry shampoo and school cafeteria and everything pure in his life. What happened? We made papier-mâché animals and mine was the best. Mrs. Rodriguez said it looked just like a real dog. Yeah, what kind of dog? A golden retriever. Maya wrapped her arms around his neck. Like Max. Do you think Victoria would want to see it? Ethan's heart clenched. Maybe someday. Can we visit them? I want to make sure Max is doing his exercises right. The vet said he has to do exercises. We'll see, baby. You always say that when the answer is no, Maya said, entirely too perceptive for 7 years old. Sometimes the answer is we'll see, and we actually will see. Maya studied his face seriously. Are you in trouble because of Victoria? What makes you think that? Because you stopped smiling when you talk about her, and you used to smile. She said it with devastating simplicity. You smiled in the coffee shop, but now you look sad. Ethan didn't know how to respond to that. Didn't know how to explain that sometimes adults had to choose between things that made them smile and things that kept them safe. I'm not in trouble, he said finally. I'm just dealing with some complicated grown-up stuff, but it's going to be okay. I promise. Okay? Maya hugged him tighter. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, baby, more than anything in the world. They walked home together through the October afternoon, Maya chattering about school while Ethan tried not to think about the custody battle ahead, the job he might lose if Morrison found out he'd been moonlighting, The woman who'd somehow become important to him in 3 impossible weeks. His phone stayed silent in his pocket. Victoria didn't text again. And Ethan told himself that was exactly what he needed. Distance, clarity, focus on what mattered. He almost believed it. 2 weeks passed in a blur of legal paperwork and sleepless nights. Patricia Keene moved fast, filing a response to Jessica's motion that systematically dismantled every claim of parental unfitness. She gathered statements from Maya's teachers, her pediatrician, the daycare director. She documented Ethan's work history, his apartment lease, every mundane detail of his life that proved he was a stable, capable parent. But Jessica's lawyers pushed back just as hard. They requested depositions, demanded financial records, filed motions for expedited hearings. The legal bills stacked up faster than Ethan could pay them, even with Patricia's discounted rate. He started skipping lunches, canceling the streaming services, cutting every corner he could find. Maya noticed. Of course she noticed. "Why don't we get pizza anymore?" she asked one night over yet another dinner of pasta and jarred sauce. "We're saving money, baby." "For what?" "Just for later." Ethan couldn't quite meet her eyes. "Eat your vegetables." She picked at her broccoli, and Ethan felt the familiar guilt settle in his chest. This was supposed to be the part where he protected her from the adult problems. Instead, she was eating budget meals and asking questions he couldn't answer. Work became its own nightmare. Morrison had noticed Ethan's distraction and responded with increasingly critical comments about missed details and sloppy work. The Hale Dynamics contract review was still ongoing, but Ethan had been quietly removed from the account and reassigned to smaller clients. He told himself it was better this way. Less risk of running into Victoria, less chance of making the custody situation worse. He didn't let himself think about how much he missed those Thursday meetings. The preliminary custody hearing was scheduled for the first week of November. Patricia warned him that it wouldn't be pleasant. "Jessica's lawyers are going to try to rattle you," she said during a prep session. "They'll ask about your relationship with Victoria Hale, your work performance, your financial situation. They'll try to make you look unstable or desperate. Your job is to stay calm and stick to the facts." "What?" "I can do that." "Can you?" Because in my experience, single fathers in custody battles have a tendency to either get defensive or apologetic, and neither plays well with judges. Ethan thought about that, about how he'd spent 2 years apologizing for the divorce, for Jessica leaving, for not being enough to make her stay, about how defensive he'd gotten when Morrison questioned his work, when Jessica's lawyers implied he was a bad father, when his own parents suggested Maya would be better off in Seattle. "I won't apologize for being a good parent," he said finally. "And I won't defend myself against accusations that aren't true. I'll just tell the judge what Maya's life actually looks like." Patricia smiled. "Good. Hold on to that." The night before the hearing, Ethan couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through potential questions and answers, trying to prepare for every possible attack. Around 2 a.m, he gave up and went to check on Maya. She was asleep with Mr. Trunk tucked under her chin, her face peaceful in the dim glow from her nightlight. Ethan stood in the doorway watching her breathe, feeling the weight of everything he stood to lose crushing down on him. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out expecting spam, but it was a text from an unknown number. "I know you said you needed space, but I wanted you to know I'm thinking about you tomorrow. You're going to do great. V." Ethan stared at the message for a long time. Victoria must have gotten a new phone number, something untraceable that wouldn't show up if Jessica's lawyers subpoenaed his records. She was being careful, protecting him even though he'd cut her off. He typed and deleted 3 different responses before finally settling on, "Thank you. How are you holding up?" The response came immediately, like she'd been waiting for him to reply. "Surviving. North Shore hit 15% ownership yesterday. The board meeting is next week. I'm sorry I couldn't help more." "Don't be. You made the right choice. Maya needs you focused." Ethan hesitated, then typed, "How's Max? Running again, finally." The vet cleared him for off-leash exercise. "He's been living at the dog park. Maya will be glad to hear that. She asks about him constantly." There was a longer pause before Victoria's next message appeared. "I miss talking to you." Ethan closed his eyes, leaning against Maya's doorframe. He wanted to say he missed her too, wanted to tell her about the custody hearing, about the fear that had been eating at him for weeks, about how talking to her in that coffee shop had been the first time in 2 years he'd felt like something other than a tired single father barely keeping his head above water. Instead, he typed, "I should get some sleep. Big day tomorrow?" "Right. Of course. Good luck, Ethan." He almost responded, almost let himself fall into the conversation the way he had before, when they'd stayed up texting about corporate strategy and Chicago weather and nothing important at all. But Patricia's warning echoed in his head. Victoria Hale was a complication he couldn't afford. Ethan deleted the entire message thread and went back to bed, where he didn't sleep anyway. The courtroom was smaller than Ethan expected, more like a large office than the dramatic spaces he'd seen on TV. Judge Sarah Morrison, no relation to his boss, thankfully, presided from a modest bench while lawyers shuffled papers and court reporters prepared their equipment. Jessica sat at the plaintiff's table with her attorneys, looking perfectly composed in a navy dress that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent. She'd cut her hair since he'd last seen her, styled it differently. She looked good, successful, like someone who had their life together. Ethan sat with Patricia and tried not to feel like he was already losing. "All rise. The hearing started with procedural matters that Ethan barely followed. Jessica's lead attorney was a sharp-looking woman named Karen Bradshaw, who spoke with the kind of confidence that came from winning more cases than she lost. She outlined Jessica's motion efficiently, painting a picture of a concerned mother who'd reluctantly concluded that her daughter would be better off in Seattle. "Ms. Cole has remarried and established a stable home," Bradshaw said. "She works regular hours as a marketing director, lives in a 3-bedroom house in a good school district, and can provide Maya with opportunities that frankly aren't available in Mr. Cole's current circumstances." Patricia stood for the response. "Your Honor, Mr. Cole has been Maya's primary custodial parent for 2 years. During that time, Maya has thrived. She's an honor student, she has close friendships, she's happy and well-adjusted. Ms. Cole's sudden interest in full custody comes not from genuine concern about Maya's welfare, but from external pressure and financial incentives that we believe originate from third parties with no legitimate interest in this case." Bradshaw objected immediately. "That's a serious accusation without any evidence to support it. We have documentation showing that Ms. Cole's legal fees are being paid by a shell company with ties to North Shore Partners, a venture capital firm currently involved in a hostile business action against one of Mr. Cole's professional contacts." The judge's eyebrows rose. "Is this true, Ms. Bradshaw?" "Yes. Your Honor, the source of my client's legal funding is irrelevant to the question of what's best for the child. It's absolutely relevant if it suggests improper motive," Patricia countered. Judge Morrison held up a hand. "I'll hear testimony from both parties before I make any determinations about motive. Ms. Bradshaw, call your first witness." Jessica took the stand and was sworn in. Under Bradshaw's questioning, she painted herself as a devoted mother who'd made the difficult choice to relocate for her career, but now wanted to provide Maya with a more stable environment. "Can you describe your concerns about Maya's current living situation?" Bradshaw asked. "Well, Ethan works long hours," Jessica said, her voice carefully modulated. "Maya's often with babysitters or at daycare until late, and the apartment they share is quite small. Maya doesn't even have her own bedroom. Is that your primary concern?" "Part of it, but I'm also worried about the people Ethan's been associating with recently." Jessica glanced at the judge. "There have been reports that he's become involved with a woman of significant wealth and influence. I'm concerned that he's putting his personal interests ahead of Maya's well-being." Patricia stood. "Objection. Ms. Cole has no direct knowledge of Mr. Cole's professional relationships." Sustained. "Ms. Cole, please limit your testimony to facts within your personal knowledge." Jessica nodded, but the damage was done. She'd planted the seed about Victoria in the judge's mind. Patricia's cross-examination was surgical. "Ms. Cole, when was the last time you saw your daughter in person?" "I visited in June. That was 4 months ago. And before that?" "January." Jessica's jaw tightened slightly. "So twice in the past year, how many phone calls have you had with Maya during that time?" "I call regularly." "How many calls, Ms. Cole?" "I don't have an exact number. Would you say more than once a week, once a month?" "It varies. My work schedule is demanding, Sam." Yet you're asking this court to believe that you're now prepared to be Maya's primary custodial parent, despite having minimal contact with her for the past 2 years. Patricia's voice was sharp. What changed, Ms. Cole? Why now? I've gotten my life stable. I have a home to offer her, a good school district. You've had a stable life in a good school district for over a year. So I'll ask again, why now? Jessica faltered. I just think it's time. Or did someone suggest it was time? Perhaps someone willing to fund this custody fight? Objection. Bradshaw was on her feet. Counsel is badgering the witness. Sustained. Move on, Ms. Keene. Patricia nodded, but she'd made her point. The judge was watching Jessica with new skepticism. Then it was Ethan's turn. He walked to the stand feeling like his legs belonged to someone else. The court reporter swore him in and he sat down, hyper-aware of every eye in the courtroom. Patricia started with easy questions. His work history, his relationship with Maya, their daily routine. Ethan kept his answers short and factual, the way she'd coached him. Then Bradshaw stood for cross-examination, and Ethan felt his stomach drop. Mr. Cole, you work as a legal assistant at Morrison, Chen and Associates. Is that correct? Yes. And what's your annual salary? $42,000. That's quite modest for someone living in Chicago with a child to support. Do you struggle financially? We manage. That's not what I asked. Do you struggle to make ends meet? Ethan met her eyes. Sometimes. But Maya has everything she needs. Does she? You share a one-bedroom apartment, correct? Where does Maya sleep? She has the bedroom. I sleep on the couch. For how long have you been sleeping on the couch, Mr. Cole? 2 years. And you don't think that's an indication that your living situation is inadequate? I think it's an indication that I prioritize my daughter's comfort over my own. Ethan kept his voice level. Maya has a safe, clean room with everything a 7-year-old needs. The fact that I sleep in the living room doesn't change that. Bradshaw made a note. Let's talk about your work performance. Have you been facing any professional difficulties recently? No. Really? Because our investigation suggests you were recently removed from a major client account. Patricia objected. Relevance, Your Honor? I'm establishing a pattern of instability, Bradshaw said. The court needs to understand Mr. Cole's overall circumstances. I'll allow it, but make it quick, Judge Morrison said. Bradshaw turned back to Ethan. Were you removed from the Hale Dynamics account? I was reassigned. It's not unusual for legal assistants to rotate between clients. Was the reassignment related to your personal relationship with Victoria Hale, the CEO of Hale Dynamics? There it was. The question Ethan had been dreading. I don't have a personal relationship with Ms. Hale. I met her once outside of work when I helped her injured dog. After that, our only interactions were professional meetings related to the merger work Morrison was handling for her company. You met with Miss Hale alone outside of work hours at a coffee shop in Millennium Park, correct? Ethan's heart hammered. They had someone watching him, actually following him and documenting his movements. Yes, we met once to discuss a professional matter. What professional matter requires meeting at a coffee shop at 7 in the evening with your young daughter present? Ms. Hale needed consulting advice on a corporate legal issue. I brought Maya because I didn't have childcare. And you expect this court to believe that a billionaire CEO needed legal advice from a $42,000 a year assistant badly enough to meet him at a coffee shop? Objection, Patricia said. Argumentative. Sustained. Bradshaw shifted tactics. Mr. Cole, has Victoria Hale offered you money or employment in exchange for any services? She offered me a job. I turned it down. Why did you turn it down? Because accepting it would look exactly like what you're implying, Ethan thought. Because I didn't want to give Jessica's lawyers ammunition. Because I'm satisfied with my current position, he said instead. Or because you knew it would look improper to accept employment from a woman you're romantically involved with? I'm not romantically involved with Victoria Hale, but you're attracted to her. Objection! Patricia was on her feet again. The witness's feelings are completely irrelevant to his fitness as a parent. They're relevant if they're affecting his judgment. Bradshaw countered. Judge Morrison looked at Ethan over her glasses. I'll allow the question, but Mr. Cole, you may decline to answer if you feel it's invasive. Ethan thought about lying, about giving the safe answer that wouldn't complicate things further. But he'd promised himself he wouldn't apologize for things that weren't wrong, and he wouldn't defend against accusations that weren't true. I think Victoria Hale is an impressive person, he said carefully. But my personal feelings don't affect how I parent my daughter. Maya has never met Ms. Hale in any context other than one chance encounter. She's not part of our daily life. And even if I were dating someone, which I'm not, that wouldn't make me a bad father. Unless that someone is using you to gain leverage in a corporate dispute, and you're too blinded by attraction to see it. Ms. Bradshaw, Judge Morrison's voice was sharp. Ask questions. Don't make speeches. Bradshaw nodded, but she looked satisfied. She'd gotten Ethan to admit his attraction to Victoria on the record. The rest of the cross-examination was almost perfunctory. When it was over, Ethan walked back to his seat feeling like he'd been wrung out and hung up to dry. Patricia squeezed his shoulder. You did fine, she whispered. Better than fine. Oh. But Ethan wasn't so sure. He'd seen the judge's expression when he'd talked about Victoria, seen the way Jessica's lawyers had perked up when he'd admitted finding her impressive. The hearing continued with witnesses for both sides. Maya's teacher testified about what a wonderful student she was, how engaged Ethan seemed during parent-teacher conferences. The daycare director vouched for his reliability and Maya's happiness. But Jessica's witnesses painted a picture of a child who would benefit from a more traditional family structure, more financial resources, more stability. Finally, Judge Morrison called a recess. I'll review the testimony and issue a ruling within 2 weeks. In the meantime, the current custody arrangement remains in effect. Ethan felt Patricia's hand on his arm. That's good. If she was leaning toward Jessica, she might have issued a temporary modification. So we won? We didn't lose. There's a difference. Patricia started gathering her papers. The next 2 weeks are going to be rough. Stay focused on Maya, document everything you do with her, and for the love of all that's holy, stay away from Victoria Hale. Ethan nodded. Across the courtroom, Jessica was conferring with her lawyers. She glanced up, caught his eye, and for just a second her carefully composed mask slipped. She looked tired, maybe even guilty. Then Bradshaw said something and Jessica's attention snapped back, the moment gone. Ethan left the courthouse and went straight to pick up Maya from school, needing to see her, to remind himself what he was fighting for. She ran to him the way she always did, backpack bouncing. How was school, baby? Good. We learned about the solar system. Did you know Jupiter has 79 moons? I did not know that. It's true. Mrs. Rodriguez showed us pictures. Maya grabbed his hand as they walked toward the bus stop. How was your day? Boring work stuff. You say that a lot. That's because work is boring a lot. Ethan squeezed her hand. Want to get ice cream? Maya's eyes went wide. They hadn't gotten ice cream in months. Really? Really? I think we both earned it. They stopped at a small shop near their apartment, and Ethan watched Maya demolish a cone of chocolate chip while trying not to calculate how much the treat was cutting into their grocery budget. Some things were worth it. Seeing his daughter smile was worth everything. His phone buzzed, a text from the unknown number Victoria had used before. I heard about the hearing. Are you okay? Ethan stared at the message. He should delete it, should block the number, should follow Patricia's advice and stay completely away from Victoria until the custody situation was resolved. Instead, he typed, surviving. It was rough. I'm sorry. This is my fault. It's not. It's Vance's fault and Jessica's choice. You didn't do anything wrong. Neither did you, for what it's worth. Ethan glanced at Maya, happily working on her ice cream cone, completely unaware that her entire future had been argued over in a courtroom today. I need to go, he typed. But thank you for checking in. Anytime. I mean it, Ethan, if you need anything. He didn't respond to that, just put his phone away and focused on his daughter, on the simple pleasure of ice cream on a November afternoon, on pretending that the next 2 weeks wouldn't be the longest of his life. The call came from Victoria directly 6 days later. and it wasn't to ask how he was doing. "Turn on the news," she said without preamble when Ethan answered. "Channel 7, right now." "Victoria, I can't. Just turn it on, please." Ethan grabbed the remote and switched on the small TV in their apartment. Maya was at school. He'd been using the quiet to catch up on work, but now he stood in the middle of the living room watching a breaking news report that made his blood run cold. The headline read, "Billionaire CEO accused of corporate sabotage." The reporter was standing outside Hale Dynamics headquarters, talking rapidly. Explosive allegations from North Shore partners claiming that Victoria Hale deliberately destroyed company assets and sabotaged merger negotiations in an attempt to maintain control. Documents leaked this morning suggest Hale may have violated fiduciary duty to shareholders by prioritizing personal interests over company welfare. "It's a lie," Victoria's voice said in Ethan's ear. "Every word of it. They leaked fabricated documents to make it look like I've been tanking the merger deal." "Can you prove it's fabricated?" "Eventually, but by the time I do, the damage will be done. The board is calling an emergency meeting tomorrow. They're going to vote on removing me as CEO. Ethan's mind raced. "What do you need?" "Nothing. I'm not calling to ask for help. I'm calling to warn you." Victoria's voice was tight. "Vance is about to go scorched earth. He's already leaked this story to damage my credibility. If he has evidence of us working together, he'll leak that too. Your custody case will be all over the news by next week. Can he do that? He can do whatever he wants if he's willing to pay for it. Lawyers, PR firms, private investigators. He's got unlimited resources and no conscience." Victoria paused. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I should never have involved you in this." "You didn't involve me. I chose to help." "And look where that got you." Ethan watched the news coverage, seeing footage of Victoria at corporate events, photos of Hale Dynamics headquarters, analysts speculating about the company's future. The woman on the screen looked untouchable, powerful, completely in control. Nothing like the person who'd cried in the rain over her injured dog. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "Fight, same as you." Victoria's laugh was bitter. "Though I'll probably lose, the board's been looking for an excuse to replace me for years. Vance just handed them one wrapped in a bow. There has to be something." "There isn't. Not anymore. I tried playing it safe, following the rules, doing everything right, and Vance just hired better liars." She took a shaky breath. "I'm going to resign tomorrow, before they can vote me out. It's the only way to protect the company from a prolonged fight that'll destroy shareholder value." "You're giving up." "I'm being realistic. Something you told me I needed to be." Ethan thought about the woman who'd wanted to know the names of every employee affected by her merger, who'd rescheduled strategy meetings for her dog's physical therapy, who'd built a $3 billion company from nothing, and was about to lose it because she'd refused to become the kind of person who didn't care who got hurt. "Don't resign," he said. "Ethan, don't resign, not yet. Give me 1 day." "What are you going to do in 1 day? "I don't know yet. But you've spent weeks protecting me from the fallout of your corporate war. Let me try to return the favor. You have a custody hearing to worry about. You can't afford to get involved. The judge is going to rule in less than a week anyway. At this point, whatever damage Vance can do to my case, he's already done." Ethan was surprised by how calm his voice sounded. "But he hasn't beaten you yet, and I don't think you should let him." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "Why do you care?" "Because you asked me to remember the names of the people who'd lose their jobs. And I did. 300 people, Victoria. 300 people who'll be out of work if Vance takes over and strips your company for parts." Ethan paused. "Also because I don't like watching good people lose to bad ones." "I'm not that good. You're better than you think you are." He said it with absolute certainty. "Don't resign, not until we've tried everything else." "We?" "Yeah, we." Ethan was already pulling up files on his laptop, looking through the North Shore documents Victoria had sent him weeks ago. "You still have those emails from Vance's internal team, the ones outlining their takeover strategy?" "Yes, but they're not enough to prove he fabricated the sabotage allegations." "Maybe not alone, but if we can show a pattern of deliberate corporate manipulation, A History of Dishonest Tactics. Ethan scrolled through the documents, his lawyer brain finally kicking into gear after weeks of forcing it to stay quiet. There might be something here we can use. Ethan, you don't have to do this. I know, but I'm going to anyway. He glanced at the clock. Maya would be home in 2 hours. Send me everything you have on North Shore, every document, every email, every piece of evidence. I'll go through it tonight. What about Maya? She'll be asleep by 8. I can work after that. It would mean another sleepless night, but what else was new? Just send me the files. Victoria was quiet again, and when she spoke, her voice was softer. Thank you for not walking away. Thank you for not asking me to. Ethan saved the news broadcast to watch later, looking for any details that might be useful. We'll figure this out. You sound very confident for someone who just watched a billionaire's career implode on live television. I'm really good at pretending things aren't impossible until I've actually solved them. It's gotten me through law school, a divorce, and 2 years of single parenting. I figure it might work here too. That surprised a laugh out of her, small but genuine. All right, I'll send the files. But Ethan? Yeah? If this makes your custody situation worse, I need you to promise you'll stop, walk away, protect Maya. I promise. He meant it too. But as he hung up and watched the news coverage continue, watched Victoria's professional reputation get shredded by a man who'd probably never created anything in his life, Ethan felt something hard and angry settle in his chest. Gerald Vance had already tried to take away Ethan's daughter. Now he was destroying Victoria's company just because he could. And Ethan was tired of watching powerful men hurt people and get away with it. The files arrived in his encrypted email 20 minutes later. Ethan downloaded everything onto a secure drive, then made himself stop and wait for Maya to come home. There would be time to dig through corporate espionage after bedtime. Right now, his daughter needed dinner and homework help and the pretense that everything was normal. He was getting very good at that pretense. Maya fell asleep at 7:30, exhausted from a field trip to the Science Museum. Ethan tucked Mr. Trunk under her arm, kissed her forehead, and went back to the kitchen table where his laptop waited. The files Victoria had sent were extensive. Years of corporate communications, financial documents, strategic planning memos. Ethan started with the most recent material and worked backward, looking for patterns. What he found made him sick. North Shore Partners wasn't just a venture capital firm with aggressive tactics. They were essentially corporate raiders with a formula. Identify a successful company with weak board oversight, quietly acquire shares while building a file of manufactured complaints, leak damaging allegations to tank the stock price, force leadership changes, then liquidate assets for maximum profit. They'd done it to 4 companies in the past 6 years. Hale Dynamics was just the latest target. But there was something else in the documents. Something Ethan almost missed because it was buried in an email thread about an unrelated merger. A casual reference to our friends at Apex Legal helping facilitate documentation for the Chicago target. Apex Legal. Ethan pulled up a new browser window and searched for the name. It was a boutique firm specializing in corporate litigation. Their client list was private, but a little digging through public filings revealed they'd represented North Shore in 3 previous takeover attempts. One of those attempts had involved falsified compliance documents. Apex Legal had been sanctioned by the Illinois bar but never actually disbarred. Ethan kept digging. 2 hours passed, then 3. His coffee went cold. His eyes burned from staring at the screen. But he was onto something. He could feel it. At 11:30, he found what he was looking for. Buried in a document dumped from a court case that had been settled 3 years ago was an internal Apex Legal memo outlining exactly how they'd helped North Shore fabricate evidence of corporate malfeasance at a previous target company. The memo was technical and dense, but the implications were clear. North Shore had a playbook for destroying CEOs who wouldn't cooperate with their takeovers. And based on the patterns Ethan was seeing in Victoria's leaked documents, they were using the exact same playbook on her. He grabbed his phone and called her. "Did you find something?" Victoria answered on the first ring, sounding wide awake despite the late hour. "Maybe. How much do you know about a firm called Apex Legal? They're representing North Shore in the board challenge. Why? Because they have a history of fabricating evidence for corporate takeovers. I found documentation from a previous case where they admitted to falsifying documents. If we can prove they did the same thing with your sabotage allegations, we can get the board to dismiss North Shore's claims. Victoria's voice sharpened with something that sounded like hope. Can you prove it? Not yet, but the patterns are there. The leaked documents about you allegedly sabotaging the merger? They follow the same template as documents Apex created for a previous case. Same formatting quirks, same legal language, even some of the same typos. That could be coincidence. It could be. Or it could be that whoever forged your documents copy-pasted from a previous forgery and forgot to clean up their work. Ethan pulled up both documents side by side on his screen. I need to see the originals that North Shore leaked. Can you get them? The board has them. They were part of the documentation North Shore submitted to support their allegations. Can David access them? Probably. But Ethan, even if you're right about this, we'd need expert testimony to prove the documents were falsified. That takes time we don't have. Not if the forgery is obvious enough. Not if we can show clear evidence of copy-paste work that any forensic document examiner would catch immediately. Ethan was already typing up notes, outlining the argument they'd need to make. How long until the board meeting? 14 hours. Listen. Then we have 14 hours to build a case that destroys North Shore's credibility. He saved his notes and started a new document. Call David. Tell him to get those original documents tonight. I'll need high-resolution scans of every page. Ethan, it's almost midnight. I know. Do you want to save your company or not? There was a pause, then Victoria laughed. It sounded startled and a little wild. You're insane. I prefer aggressively optimistic. Can you get the documents? I'll call David now. She hung up and Ethan went back to his laptop, pulling up every piece of case law he could find on document fraud and corporate malfeasance. If they were going to do this, they needed to be bulletproof. One mistake and the board would dismiss the whole argument as a desperate CEO trying to avoid accountability. His phone rang 30 minutes later. David Chen. Victoria says you found something in the North Shore documents. Why is it? Was the Maybe. Depends on whether you can get me those leaked files the board is reviewing. I'm at the office now, emailing them to you in 5 minutes. David sounded exhausted but focused. What exactly are we looking for? Evidence that Apex Legal copied these documents from a previous forgery, formatting errors, duplicate language, anything that suggests they didn't create these from scratch. And if we find that, then we prove North Shore's entire case is built on fabricated evidence, which should be enough to get the board to vote down their takeover attempt. Should be or will be? Should be, Ethan admitted, but it's the best shot we've got. The files arrived in his inbox exactly 5 minutes later. Ethan opened them and started comparing them line by line to the documents from Apex Legal's previous case. His earlier hunch had been right. The formatting was nearly identical, down to the specific margin settings and font choices. But that wasn't enough. They needed smoking gun proof. He found it at 2:15 in the morning, buried in the metadata of a supposedly confidential Hale Dynamics internal memo that North Shore had leaked. The document had been created 6 months ago according to its timestamp, but the metadata showed it had actually been generated 2 weeks ago using a template file that originated from Apex Legal's servers. Someone had created a fake internal memo using Apex's corporate template software and backdated it to make it look authentic. Ethan immediately called Victoria. I've got it. Metadata proof that at least one of the leaked documents was created by Apex Legal and backdated to look like it came from your company. Can you walk me through how to explain that to the board? Better than that. I can come to the meeting and explain it myself. Silence on the other end of the line. Ethan, you don't have to do that. I know, but this is technical legal stuff, and if you try to explain it secondhand, you'll lose half the board in the first minute. They need to hear it from someone who understands the evidence and can answer their questions. He glanced at Maya's bedroom door, still closed, his daughter still sleeping peacefully. What time's the meeting? 10 in the morning. I'll be there. What about your job? Won't Morrison notice you're gone? Oh, Ethan thought about the legal bills, the sleepless nights, the way he'd been grinding himself down trying to keep everyone happy. Morrison, Jessica, the custody court, everyone except himself. I'll call in sick, he said. Or I won't. Maybe it's time Morrison and I had a conversation about whether this job is actually working for either of us. Ethan, I'm doing this, Victoria, not because you asked, not because I think it'll help my custody case. I'm doing it because it's right. Because Vance is a bully who destroys things for profit, and someone needs to stand up and say no. Okay, Victoria said quietly. Thank you. Don't thank me until we actually win. He spent the next 6 hours preparing a presentation that would either save Victoria's company or end his own career, possibly both. When Maya woke up at 6:30, Ethan was still at the kitchen table, surrounded by printouts and empty coffee cups. Daddy, did you sleep? Not really, baby. He stood up, his back protesting from hours in a kitchen chair. But I've got something important to do today. Mrs. Chen is going to pick you up from school and watch you until I get home. Almost. Go. The neighbor, Mrs. Chen, she's nice. She always has cookies. That's the one. Ethan knelt down to Maya's level. I might be home late, but I'll text you updates, okay? Is this about Victoria? The question caught him off guard. What makes you think that? Because you only stay up all night when something's really important. And the only times you smiled lately were when you talked about her. Maya wrapped her arms around his neck. I hope you can help her. She seemed sad. What? Ethan hugged his daughter tight, feeling the weight of everything she understood without being told. Me too, baby. Me too. He got Maya ready for school, called Mrs. Chen to confirm childcare, and then did something he'd been avoiding for weeks. He called Morrison. Ethan, where are you? The Westfield contract review was supposed to be on my desk an hour ago. I'm not coming in today. I have a personal matter to attend to. A personal matter? We're in the middle of, I know, and I'm sorry for the short notice, but this is something I have to do. There was a long pause. Does this have anything to do with Victoria Hale? So Morrison knew. Of course he knew. The leaked news story had probably made it clear that Ethan and Victoria had some kind of connection, and Morrison wasn't stupid. Yes, Ethan said. It does. Then you're fired. The word should have hit like a bomb, but Ethan just felt tired. All right. All right? That's all you have to say? Oh, what do you want me to say, Anthony? That I'm sorry? I am. That I'll choose differently? I won't. Ethan looked at the presentation material spread across his kitchen table. Victoria Hale is being destroyed by corporate raiders using falsified documents. I have evidence that can stop them. So yes, I'm choosing to help her instead of reviewing contracts for you today. Fire me if you need to. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. You're really willing to throw away your job for this? Apparently. You're an idiot, Cole. Probably. Ethan almost laughed. But I'm an idiot who can sleep at night. He hung up before Morrison could respond, then sat there for a minute processing the fact that he'd just lost his job. No more steady paycheck, no more health insurance, no more carefully balanced budget that barely kept them afloat. Patricia was going to kill him. But when Ethan looked at the evidence he'd compiled, at the presentation that would prove Victoria's innocence and North Shore's guilt, he didn't regret the choice. Some things were worth the risk. He got dressed in the only suit he owned, grabbed his laptop and presentation materials, and headed for the door. Whatever happened at the Hale Dynamics board meeting, at least he'd know he'd tried. At least he'd chosen to fight instead of hiding. That had to count for something. The Hale Dynamics headquarters occupied the top 15 floors of a glass tower in the Loop that looked like it had been designed to intimidate anyone who walked through the doors. Ethan stood on the sidewalk staring up at it, his laptop bag heavy on his shoulder, wondering if he'd completely lost his mind. He'd just gotten himself fired to defend a woman he'd known for barely a month. A woman who was about to lose her company anyway, despite his best efforts. The smart move would be to turn around, go home, focus on damage control for the custody case. Instead, Ethan walked through the gleaming lobby and told the security guard he was there for the board meeting. The guard checked his list, frowned, then made a phone call. 2 minutes later, David Chen appeared from the elevator bank, looking like he hadn't slept any more than Ethan had. You actually came, David said. I said I would. Yeah, but I figured you'd come to your senses somewhere between midnight and dawn. David gestured toward the elevators. Come on, we've got 20 minutes before the board convenes and Victoria wants to review your presentation. They rode up in silence. The elevator was the kind with glass walls that showed the city dropping away below them, and Ethan tried not to think about how far he was about to fall if this didn't work. The executive floor was all polished wood and expensive art, the kind of space designed to remind visitors that they were in the presence of serious money. David led him through a maze of corridors to a conference room where Victoria stood at the windows, staring out at Chicago's skyline. She turned when they entered, and Ethan saw the exhaustion etched in every line of her face. She'd changed from the previous night, now wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than his rent, her hair pulled back severely, every inch the CEO who'd built an empire. But her eyes were red-rimmed, and there was a tightness around her mouth that spoke of fear she was trying very hard to hide. "You came," she said, echoing David's words. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "I thought you'd be smart enough to protect yourself." Victoria crossed the room to stand in front of him. "You shouldn't be here, Ethan. If this goes badly, it'll destroy whatever's left of your custody case. Jessica's lawyers will paint you as someone who chose helping a billionaire over his own daughter." "They're going to paint me that way regardless. At least this way I'll have actually earned it." "That's not funny." "I'm not joking." Ethan set his laptop bag on the conference table. "I've spent 2 years making safe choices. Being careful. Trying not to make waves. And you know where it got me? Fighting a custody battle funded by a corporate raider who decided I was useful leverage. So yeah, maybe it's time I stopped being careful and started fighting back." Victoria stared at him for a long moment, something complicated moving across her face. "I don't deserve you on my side." "Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway." Ethan pulled out his laptop and the printed presentation materials. "Now, do you want to see what I found? Or do you want to keep arguing about whether I should be here?" David cleared his throat. "We should definitely see what you found. We've got 15 minutes. Ethan walked them through the evidence quickly and methodically. The metadata analysis showing the leaked documents had been created by Apex Legal, the comparison to previous forgeries showing identical patterns. The case law establishing that document fabrication invalidated any claims based on those documents. Victoria listened without interrupting, her expression growing sharper as he talked. When he finished, she looked at David. "Is this enough? To prove fraud?" "Absolutely." "To convince the board?" David hesitated. "Depends on how many of them were already planning to vote you out anyway. So we're banking on at least some of them caring about the truth." "That's generally how these things work. Yes." Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. "We're screwed." "Maybe not," Ethan said. "The board might be hostile to you, but they're not hostile to their own financial interests. If I can make them understand that voting for North Shore means voting to legitimize fraud, that they'll be personally liable if shareholders sue over the decision, you're going to threaten them? I'm going to remind them that enabling corporate fraud has consequences. There's a difference." David grinned. "I like him. Can we keep him?" "Oh, he just got himself fired from his actual job to be here," Victoria said. "I'm not sure that qualifies as sound decision-making." Ethan met her eyes. "I make terrible decisions constantly, but I commit to them completely. It's kind of my thing." Something in Victoria's expression cracked, just for a second, showing the fear and gratitude underneath. "Thank you. For this. For all of it. Thank me after we win." A knock on the door interrupted them. Sandra Park stuck her head in, looking grim. "The board's assembling. North Shore's representatives are already in the room with their legal team. And there's press outside the building. Someone leaked that this meeting was happening." "Of course they did." Victoria straightened her shoulders, her mask sliding back into place. "Let's get this over with." They walked together to the main boardroom, a massive space dominated by a table that could seat 30 people. 12 board members were already there, along with 3 men in expensive suits who had to be North Shore's team. Ethan recognized one of them from his research, Gerald Vance himself, a thin man in his 50s with the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. Vance saw Victoria enter and his smile widened. "Ms. Hale, I'd say it's good to see you, but under the circumstances that would be disingenuous." "Mr. Vance," Victoria's voice was ice. "I see you brought your lawyers, planning to need them?" "Just being thorough, though I notice you've brought someone new as well." Vance's gaze slid to Ethan, assessing and dismissive. "I don't believe we've met." "Ethan Cole." legal counsel. Eat. How interesting. I was under the impression Ms. Hale's legal counsel was David Chen. Mr. Cole is consulting on a specific matter related to today's proceedings, Victoria said smoothly. Now, shall we begin? I believe the board has matters to discuss. The board chairman, a silver-haired man named Robert Garrison, called the meeting to order. We're here to address serious allegations brought by North Shore Partners regarding potential misconduct by CEO Victoria Hale. Mr. Vance, you have the floor. Vance stood, projecting confidence like a weapon. Thank you, Mr. Garrison. As outlined in the materials we've provided, our investigation has uncovered evidence that Ms. Hale has systematically sabotaged merger negotiations and destroyed company assets in order to maintain her position as CEO. The documentation is extensive and damning. He proceeded to walk through the leaked documents, painting a picture of Victoria as a desperate executive willing to burn her own company rather than relinquish control. The board members listened with varying expressions of concern and satisfaction. Ethan could see which ones had already made up their minds against Victoria. When Vance finished, Garrison looked at Victoria. Ms. Hale, you have an opportunity to respond to these allegations. Victoria stood. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The allegations are false. The documents, Mr. Vance has provided our fabrications created by his legal team to manufacture justification for a hostile takeover, and we can prove it. Murmurs around the table. Vance's smile didn't waver. That's a serious accusation, Ms. Hale. I assume you have evidence? We do. Mr. Cole? Oh. Ethan stood, feeling 12 pairs of eyes lock onto him. His hands were sweating, but his voice came out steady. Good morning. My name is Ethan Cole, and I've spent the past 8 hours analyzing the documents that North Shore provided to this board. What I found is evidence of systematic fraud. He opened his laptop and pulled up the presentation on the room's main screen. The documents allegedly showing Ms. Hale's misconduct contain metadata indicating they were created by Apex Legal, North Shore's law firm, not by Hale Dynamics staff. The creation dates have been manually altered to appear older than they actually are. One of Vance's lawyers stood. 1. That's speculation based on technical data that could have multiple explanations. It's forensic evidence that would hold up in any court, Ethan cut him off. But if you'd like more, I can show you how these documents follow the exact same template as previous forgeries Apex Legal created for a case 3 years ago. Same formatting errors, same unusual phrasing. In some cases, identical typos. He pulled up the comparison slides, showing the leaked Hale documents next to the documents from Apex's previous case. The similarities were obvious even to non-technical viewers. This isn't coincidence, Ethan continued. This is a pattern. North Shore Partners has used this exact playbook before. Manufacture evidence of executive misconduct, force a board vote, take control of the company, then liquidate assets for profit. They've done it to 4 companies in the past 6 years. Hale Dynamics is just the latest target. The room was silent now. Even Vance's smile had faltered slightly. Garrison leaned forward. Mr. Vance, do you have a response to these allegations? This is a desperate attempt by Ms. Hale to avoid accountability. I'm asking for a substantive response to the evidence Mr. Cole has presented, Garrison said sharply. Can you explain why these documents appear to have originated from your legal team? Vance glanced at his lawyers. One of them stepped forward. The metadata Mr. Cole is referencing could have been altered by anyone with access to the files. It proves nothing about their origin. Except that I have the original files from your submission to this board, David interjected, standing up. Files that were supposedly secure Hale Dynamics internal documents. And those files contain embedded references to Apex Legal template structures. Unless you're suggesting Ms. Hale created fake documents about herself using your law firm's proprietary templates. This is absurd. This is fraud, Ethan said flatly. And if this board votes to remove Ms. Hale based on fabricated evidence, every member of this board will be personally liable when shareholders sue, which they will, because I'll make sure they have all the documentation they need. One of the board members, a woman Ethan didn't recognize, spoke up. Mr. Cole, You're saying North Shore deliberately created false documents to frame Ms. Hale? I'm saying the evidence strongly suggests that yes. And I'm saying that Apex Legal has a documented history of doing exactly this kind of work for North Shore's previous takeover attempts. It's not speculation, it's pattern recognition. Vance was on his feet now, his composure cracking. This is character assassination based on circumstantial... It's documentary evidence based on metadata analysis and historical patterns, Ethan interrupted. And if you'd like to challenge it, I suggest you hire your own forensic document examiner. Though given that Apex Legal is your firm, that might be awkward. The board erupted in competing voices. Some members demanded more explanation. Others wanted to adjourn and review the evidence independently. Garrison banged his gavel, trying to restore order. Victoria remained standing, perfectly still, watching the chaos with an expression Ethan couldn't read. Finally, Garrison got the room quiet. We're going to take a 30-minute recess to review this new information. Board members only. Everyone else, please clear the room. Ethan gathered his materials and followed Victoria and David out. The moment the door closed behind them, Victoria turned to him. That was either brilliant or suicidal. I'm not sure which. Could be both, Ethan said. His hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was wearing off. Did I help or make it worse? You scared the hell out of them, David said. Sure, which is exactly what we needed. Half that board is only supporting Vance because they thought it was a safe bet. You just made it very unsafe. Victoria was still looking at Ethan, something complicated in her expression. You threatened the entire board with personal liability. I reminded them of the legal consequences of their actions. There's a difference. Is there? But she was almost smiling when she said it. Sandra appeared from down the hallway. The press is getting aggressive. They're demanding a statement about the emergency board meeting. Tell them we'll have a statement when the board completes its deliberations, Victoria said. And if the board votes to remove you, then tell them we'll have a lawsuit filed by end of business tomorrow. Victoria's voice was steady, but Ethan saw her hands clench briefly. One way or another, this ends today. They waited in Victoria's office while the board deliberated. Ethan tried not to watch the clock, but time seemed to move in strange jumps. 10 minutes passing in what felt like seconds, then single minutes dragging on forever. His phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Keene. Heard you crashed a board meeting at Hale Dynamics. Please tell me you didn't just destroy your custody case to play corporate lawyer. Ethan stared at the message, trying to figure out how Patricia already knew. Then he remembered Sandra mentioning press outside the building. Of course, someone had recognized him. Of course, it was already news. He typed back, I did what I had to do. We'll deal with the fallout. Patricia's response was immediate. The hearing for the custody ruling is tomorrow morning. Jessica's lawyers are going to tear you apart over this. I know. Do you? Because I'm looking at photos of you entering Hale Dynamics this morning, and I'm trying to figure out how to explain to a judge that this isn't exactly what it looks like. Ethan glanced at Victoria, who was pacing by the windows while talking quietly on her phone. At David, reviewing documents at the conference table. At the life he'd somehow stumbled into that was nothing like the careful, controlled existence he'd built for himself in Maya. Tell the judge the truth, he typed. I helped someone who needed it. If that makes me a bad father, then I guess I'm a bad father. He put his phone away before Patricia could respond and found Victoria watching him. Custody hearing? She asked quietly. Tomorrow morning. My lawyer thinks I just handed Jessica the win. I'm sorry. Don't be. I made the choice. I'll live with the consequences. Ethan tried for a smile and almost managed it. Besides, maybe the board will rule in your favor and at least one of us will win something today. And if they don't, well, then we both lose spectacularly and at least we'll have company. Victoria crossed the room to stand in front of him. They were alone now. David had left to take a phone call. Sandra was dealing with press. Just the two of them in this quiet office, high above Chicago. I need to tell you something, Victoria said. Before the board comes back, before everything gets complicated again. Okay. That night on the riverwalk when you saved Max, that wasn't the first time I'd thought about just walking into the river and not coming back out. The confession hit Ethan like a physical blow. Victoria, I was driving too fast on purpose, taking corners I knew were dangerous. I told myself I was just stressed about the North Shore situation, but that was a lie. I was tired of fighting, of being alone, of building this massive company that was supposed to matter and realizing I had no one to share it with. Why are you telling me this? Because you asked me once why I care so much about saving Hale Dynamics. And the truth is, until about a month ago, I didn't. I was ready to let Vance take it, walk away, disappear. Victoria's voice was steady, but her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Then I saw you protecting your daughter in the rain while rescuing a dog you'd never met. And something in me couldn't let go after that. Couldn't give up. Because if you could keep fighting for what mattered despite everything you'd lost, then maybe I could too. Ethan didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to process the idea that his life, his messy, struggling, barely holding together life, had somehow mattered to someone like Victoria Hale. I'm not anyone's inspiration, he managed. I'm just trying to survive. That's what makes it count. Victoria reached out, her hand stopping just short of touching his. You survive with integrity. You make impossible choices and live with them. You lose everything and keep going anyway. That's not just survival, Ethan. That's courage. Victoria. The office door opened. David stuck his head in, his expression unreadable. Board's ready. They're calling everyone back. Victoria's hand dropped. The moment shattered. She straightened her shoulders, her mask sliding back into place like armor. Let's go. They walked back to the boardroom together, and this time Ethan noticed things he'd missed before. The way Victoria's hands trembled slightly before she clasped them together. The way she took a deep breath before pushing open the door. The way she looked at him one last time before stepping into whatever the board had decided. She was terrified. Completely, utterly terrified. And she was walking in anyway. The board members were seated again, their expressions giving nothing away. Garrison waited until everyone was settled before speaking. The board has reviewed the evidence presented by both parties. We have serious concerns about the provenance of the documents North Shore submitted. Mr. Vance, your team has been unable to satisfactorily explain the metadata inconsistencies or the similarities to previous cases involving Apex Legal. Vance's face was stone. Mr. Chairman. However, Garrison continued, and Ethan's stomach dropped. We also have concerns about Ms. Hale's judgment in recent months. Her confrontational approach with North Shore, her involvement with outside consultants, his gaze flicked briefly to Ethan, and her general unwillingness to consider compromise solutions. So you're removing her anyway, David said flatly. We're proposing a compromise. Ms. Hale remains as CEO, but with a restructured board that includes 3 new members appointed by North Shore partners. Additionally, all major strategic decisions require board approval going forward. Victoria stood slowly. You're asking me to give Vance control of my company through board manipulation. We're asking you to accept oversight that will satisfy shareholders and prevent the kind of controversy that's been damaging company value. The controversy that Vance manufactured with fraudulent documents. The controversy that exists regardless of its origin, Garrison said. Ms. Hale, you have a choice. Accept the compromise and keep your position with reduced authority, or reject it, and we'll vote on your removal. Ethan watched Victoria's face, saw her calculating the options, saw the moment she realized the board had already decided. This was a fig leaf, a way for them to appear reasonable while still giving Vance exactly what he wanted. How many votes do you have for my removal? Victoria asked. 7 confirmed, with 2 more likely. You do the math. So Vance had won. Maybe not completely, but enough. He'd get his board seats, his oversight authority, and eventually, when Victoria refused to play along, he'd get his votes to remove her entirely. Ethan stood up. Before Ms. Hale answers, I have a question for the board. Garrison frowned. This is a closed session, Mr. Cole. I understand, but I think the board should know that 3 reporters are currently outside this building with full documentation of the fraud analysis I presented earlier. If this board votes to remove Ms. Hale or force her into a compromise that benefits North Shore, despite evidence of document fabrication, That story goes live within the hour. Are you threatening this board? One of the members demanded. I'm informing you that your decision will be public, and that shareholders tend to react poorly when they discover their board-enabled corporate fraud. Ethan kept his voice level. You want to vote against Ms. Hale? That's your right, but do it knowing that everyone will know exactly why you made that choice. The room erupted again. Vance was on his feet, his lawyers shouting about intimidation. Board members were arguing with each other. Garrison was banging his gavel uselessly. Victoria grabbed Ethan's arm. What reporters? We don't have any reporters. I know, but they don't know that. You're bluffing? Aggressively. Ethan met her eyes. The question is whether your board is willing to call the bluff. Garrison finally got order restored. Mr. Cole, you're out of line. Mr. Cole is exactly right, a voice said from the back of the room. Everyone turned. A woman Ethan didn't recognize had entered through the side door, accompanied by two other people with recording equipment. Janet Morrison, Chicago Business Journal, she said, holding up a press badge. We received an anonymous tip about this meeting and the fraud allegations. We'd very much like to hear the board's official response to Mr. Cole's analysis before you vote. Complete chaos. Garrison was demanding to know how press got into a closed session. Vance's lawyers were threatening lawsuits. Board members were shouting competing points of order. And in the middle of it all, Victoria turned to Ethan with an expression of absolute shock. Did you actually call the press? No, I have no idea who that is. Then how, Sue? David appeared at Victoria's shoulder, looking entirely too pleased with himself. I may have sent the fraud analysis to a few media contacts this morning. You know, just in case we needed leverage. Victoria stared at him. You risked contempt charges to leak board materials to the press? I risked nothing. I'm not a board member. I'm just an employee who thought the public should know about potential corporate fraud. David grinned. Also, I'm pretty sure I'm fired now. So what are they going to do? Fire me twice? The reporter was advancing into the room now, her colleagues filming. Mr. Vance, can you comment on allegations that North Shore Partners used fabricated documents to force this board meeting? Vance's composure finally cracked completely. Get them out of here! Composure finally... This is a private session, Garrison started. A private session about matters of significant public interest, the reporter countered. Our sources indicate possible securities fraud. The public has a right to know. Garrison looked at his fellow board members, at the cameras, at the complete disaster the meeting had become. We're adjourning. No vote will take place today. Ms. Hale, you remain as CEO, pending further review. This meeting is over. So he banged the gavel one final time and fled the room, most of the other board members following. Vance stood frozen, staring at the cameras like a man watching his entire strategy collapse in real time. Then he turned to Victoria, and the hatred in his eyes was absolutely naked. This isn't over. Yes, Victoria said quietly. It is. Vance and his team swept out, leaving just Victoria, Ethan, David, and the reporter with her crew. Janet Morrison approached with a business card. Ms. Hale, I'd love to get your official comment for our story. Call my office tomorrow, Victoria said, her voice steady despite everything. We'll arrange an interview. The reporter left, and suddenly the boardroom was empty except for the three of them. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Victoria started laughing. Not the controlled professional sound Ethan had heard before, but something wild and almost hysterical. We actually did it, she said. We actually won. You won, Ethan corrected. I just provided the technical analysis. And I just committed career suicide by leaking to the press, David added cheerfully. So we all contributed. Victoria was still laughing, and now there were tears running down her face. And Ethan realized she wasn't just laughing. She was crying and laughing at the same time, all the fear and relief and exhaustion pouring out in a way she'd probably never let herself feel in front of anyone. David tactfully excused himself, muttering something about damage control with HR. That left Ethan and Victoria alone in the massive boardroom, surrounded by the wreckage of Vance's failed takeover attempt. Thank you, Victoria said when she could finally speak again. For everything, for the analysis, for the bluff, for being willing to blow up your own life to help me. I didn't blow up my life. Morrison already fired me this morning. What? Yeah, called him to say I wasn't coming in. He asked if it was about you. I said yes. He fired me. Ethan shrugged. Honestly, it was probably coming anyway. I haven't exactly been employee of the month material lately. Victoria wiped her eyes, smearing her carefully applied makeup. I'm sorry, that's my fault. It's Vance's fault and my choice. Stop apologizing for things you didn't do. She looked at him for a long moment, and Ethan saw something shift in her expression, something that made his heart rate pick up despite all the very good reasons he had to keep his distance. Ethan, his phone rang, shattering the moment. Patricia's name on the screen. I have to take this, he said apologetically. Victoria nodded, and Ethan stepped into the hallway to answer. Please tell me you have good news, he said instead of hello. That depends on your definition of good news, Patricia said. Jessica's lawyers just filed a motion to postpone tomorrow's hearing. Why would they postpone? They've been pushing for expedited everything. Because the judge called them this morning and suggested they might want to reconsider their claims about your professional judgment given the news coverage of your fraud analysis at Hale Dynamics. Patricia sounded almost amused. Apparently proving that a billionaire CEO was being framed by corporate raiders makes you look less like an opportunist and more like someone with actual integrity. Ethan leaned against the wall, trying to process that. So they're dropping the custody challenge? Not dropping, postponing pending further review, which in lawyer speak usually means they're looking for a face-saving way to withdraw the whole thing. Patricia paused. You did good, Ethan. Stupid, reckless, possibly insane, but good. Maya's lucky to have you. Thanks, Patricia. Don't thank me yet. You still need to find a new job, and your reputation in Chicago legal circles is now complicated at best. But at least you'll probably keep your daughter. Ethan hung up and stood there for a minute, letting it sink in. The custody fight might actually be over. Maya would stay with him. They'd survive this. He walked back into the boardroom and found Victoria exactly where he'd left her, standing by the windows looking out at the city. Everything okay? She asked without turning around. Better than okay. Jessica's postponing the custody hearing. Patricia thinks they're looking for a way to drop the whole thing. Victoria turned and the smile on her face was radiant. Ethan, that's incredible. Yeah. Turns out publicly exposing corporate fraud makes you look like less of a terrible father. Who knew? You were never a terrible father. Tell that to Jessica's lawyers. But Ethan was smiling too, feeling lighter than he had in weeks. I should go. Pick up Maya from school. Tell her the good news. Well, the edited version that doesn't include corporate espionage and potential securities violations. Right, of course. Victoria crossed the room to stand in front of him. Ethan, about what I said earlier, you don't have to explain. I want to. She took a breath. I meant it. You saved more than my dog that night. And today you saved my company. I don't know how to repay that. You don't have to repay anything. We helped each other. That's how it works. Is that all we did? Help each other? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with everything they'd both been carefully not saying for weeks. Ethan thought about Patricia's warnings, about keeping professional boundaries, about not complicating his life any further. Then he thought about Victoria crying in the rain, about her admission that she'd been ready to give up before she met him, about the way she looked at Maya like she was seeing something precious and fragile. I don't know, he said honestly. I think we did something more than that. I'm just not sure what it is yet. When you figure it out, will you tell me? Yeah, I will. Victoria smiled, small and uncertain in a way he'd never seen from her before. Good, because I'd really like to know. Ethan left Hale Dynamics and walked out into November sunshine that felt impossibly bright. His phone was already buzzing with messages, from David, from Patricia, from a number he didn't recognize that turned out to be a reporter wanting an interview. He ignored all of them and texted Mrs. Chen. On my way to pick up Maya. Thanks for watching her. The response came back immediately. No problem. She's made 3 batches of cookies. You're welcome for the sugar rush. Ethan smiled and started the walk to the bus stop, feeling the weight of the past month finally starting to lift. He'd lost his job, nearly lost his daughter, and helped a billionaire CEO fight off corporate raiders using nothing but metadata analysis and sheer stubbornness. It was the most ridiculous thing he'd ever done. And somehow, against all odds, it had actually worked. His phone buzzed one more time. A text from Victoria. "Thank you doesn't cover it, but I'll keep saying it anyway. Thank you." Ethan typed back, "Buy me coffee sometime and we'll call it even." The response was immediate. "Deal. How about Saturday?" He stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the keyboard. Saturday meant a date. Or not a date. Or something that could turn into a date if they let it. It meant choosing to keep Victoria in his life instead of walking away like the smart, safe choice would be. Ethan thought about Maya asking if the sad lady with the dog was okay. About Victoria wanting to know the names of people who'd lose their jobs. About the two of them sitting in a coffee shop while the world tried to tear them both apart, choosing to trust each other anyway. "Saturday works," he typed. "But fair warning, Maya's gonna want to come. She has questions about Max's physical therapy regimen. Bring her. I'll bring Max. He misses her anyway. See you Saturday." Ethan put his phone away and caught the bus, heading toward his daughter and whatever came next, feeling like maybe, just maybe, impossible things were starting to become possible after all. Saturday came with the kind of crisp November weather that made Chicago look like something out of a postcard. Ethan woke up early, made pancakes for Maya, and tried not to think too hard about the fact that he was about to see Victoria outside of crisis mode for the first time. Maya was vibrating with excitement, bouncing around the apartment while Ethan tried to get her into a clean sweater. "Hold still, baby." "I can't. I'm too excited. We're going to see Max." She finally stopped moving long enough for Ethan to pull the sweater over her head. "Do you think he remembers me?" "I'm sure he does." "What if he doesn't? What if he only remembers you because you saved him? Then we'll just have to remind him how awesome you are." Ethan grabbed her jacket from the hook by the door. "Come on, we don't want to be late." They met Victoria at the dog park on the north side, a sprawling green space that was surprisingly empty for a Saturday morning. Ethan spotted her before she saw them, standing by the entrance with Max on a leash, looking nervous in a way that CEOs probably weren't supposed to look. She'd dressed down, jeans, a sweater, her hair loose instead of pulled back. She looked younger like this, more human, less like the woman who commanded boardrooms, and more like someone who might actually be as scared of this as Ethan was. Maya saw Max and shrieked, breaking away from Ethan to run toward them. The golden retriever's tail started wagging so hard his entire back end moved, and when Maya reached him, he nearly knocked her over with enthusiastic licking. "He remembers me," Maya laughed, wrapping her arms around Max's neck. "I told you he would." Victoria was smiling, that real smile Ethan had only seen a handful of times. "He's been asking about you too. Well, in dog language, lots of whining and staring at the door." Ethan reached them, suddenly awkward now that they were face to face without corporate fraud or custody battles to discuss. Hey. Victoria looked at him, then at Maya and Max, then back at him. "This is weird, right? I'm not imagining that this is weird. It's definitely weird." "Good. I thought maybe I'd forgotten how to be a normal person." She unclipped Max's leash. "He's cleared for off-leash now. Want to let him run?" Maya was already chasing Max across the grass, both of them moving with the pure joy of things that had been cooped up too long and finally set free. Ethan and Victoria followed at a slower pace, maintaining a careful distance that felt both safe and completely inadequate. "How's Maya handling everything?" Victoria asked. "Better than I am, honestly. I told her the custody thing was resolved and she just said good and went back to her homework." Ethan shoved his hands in his pockets. Ethan shoved his. "Kids are resilient in ways that terrify me." "You're doing a good job with her. Anyone can see that." "Yeah, well, Jessica's lawyers finally figured it out. Patricia called yesterday to confirm they're officially withdrawing the custody motion. Something about not wanting to proceed with litigation that lacks merit." Ethan smiled without humor. "Turns out proving that her case was funded by corporate raiders who fabricated evidence made them look bad. Who knew? I'm sorry you had to go through that. I'm sorry you had to go through any of this. The takeover attempt, the board betrayal, all of it." Victoria stopped walking, turning to face him. "Ethan, I need you to stop apologizing for things that aren't your fault. Vance targeted you because of me. That's on him, not you." "I'm not apologizing. I'm just acknowledging that this whole situation was complicated and messy, and neither of us handled it perfectly. Is anyone supposed to handle corporate warfare and custody battles perfectly? Probably not. Ethan watched Maya and Max playing fetch with a stick that was definitely too big for either of them to carry properly. For what it's worth, I'd do it all again. The board meeting, the fraud analysis, all of it. Even getting fired. Especially getting fired. Morrison was a terrible boss, and I should have quit years ago. Ethan paused. Though I do need to figure out the whole employment situation eventually. Maya needs health insurance, and I need to pay rent. David wants to hire you. Ethan looked at her sharply. What? He's been talking about expanding the legal department now that the North Shore situation is resolved. Says he needs someone who actually understands forensic document analysis and isn't afraid to call out fraud when they see it. Victoria's expression was carefully neutral. The job is real. The salary is competitive. And before you say no because you think I'm trying to rescue you, David made the offer independently. I'm just the messenger. Victoria, you don't have to decide now. Just think about it. She started walking again. Though fair warning, David is a terrible boss in completely different ways than Morrison. He eats everyone's lunch out of the office fridge and holds meetings that should absolutely be emails. Ethan surprised himself by laughing. That's your sales pitch, eh? I'm trying to be honest about what you'd be getting into. The job is real work, not charity. You'd be earning every dollar. Victoria glanced at him, but it would mean seeing each other, at work, regularly, and I don't know if that's something you'd want. Is it something you'd want? I asked you first. Maya came running back, Max bounding alongside her. Daddy! Victoria, watch this! Oh! She threw the stick and Max took off after it, his golden fur gleaming in the sunlight. He was running full out now, completely recovered from the accident that had brought all of them together. He's so fast. Maya was beaming. The vet did a really good job with his therapy. He had a good patient, Victoria said. Max is very motivated when it comes to running and playing. Just like me. Maya grabbed Victoria's hand unselfconsciously. Can we go to the pond? I want to see if there are ducks. Victoria looked startled by the contact, then pleased. Sure, let's go see. They walked together toward the pond at the center of the park. Maya chattering about school and her friends and the science project she was working on. Victoria listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she was actually paying attention. Ethan watched them together and felt something shift in his chest. Maya had been so careful around adults since the divorce, especially women. She never reached for Jessica's hand anymore, never volunteered information about her life. But with Victoria, she was open and trusting in a way that made Ethan realize how much his daughter had been protecting herself. The pond was empty of ducks, but full of fallen leaves that Maya immediately started throwing for Max to chase. Victoria sat down on a bench and Ethan joined her, both of them watching Maya play. She's wonderful, Victoria said quietly. You've raised an incredible kid. I've survived raising a kid. There's a difference. No, there isn't. Survival is just another word for showing up every day and doing the work even when it's hard. That's what makes you a good parent. Ethan thought about that, about the nights he'd been so tired he could barely function, the times he'd served Maya cereal for dinner because cooking felt impossible, the constant fear that he was doing everything wrong and Maya would grow up damaged because of his failures. I don't always feel like a good parent, he admitted. Good parents rarely do. It's the bad ones who think they've got it all figured out. Victoria drew her knees up, wrapping her arms around them. My mother used to say that anyone who claims parenting is easy is either lying or not paying attention. Your mom sounds smart. She was. Died when I was 15. Cancer. Victoria said it matter-of-factly, but Ethan heard the old pain underneath. After that, it was just me. My father was long gone. No other family. I learned pretty quickly that if I wanted anything in life, I'd have to build it myself. Is that why you started Hale Dynamics? Partly, but mostly I started it because I was angry. She smiled slightly. Angry at my father for leaving, angry at my mother for dying, angry at a world that seemed designed to punish people for being vulnerable. I thought if I could build something big enough, important enough, I'd finally prove that I wasn't just some abandoned kid who got lucky. Did it work? No. Victoria's laugh was soft and bitter. I built a $3 billion company, and I was still just as lonely and angry as I'd been at 15. Turns out money doesn't actually fix the broken parts. It just makes them more expensive. Maya ran over, breathless and happy. Can Max have some water? He's panting a lot. Victoria pulled a collapsible bowl and water bottle from her bag. Good thinking. You're taking excellent care of him. Urshem. Maya beamed at the praise and carefully poured water for Max, who drank enthusiastically before going back to exploring. You're good with her, Ethan said when Maya was out of earshot again. I don't know what I'm doing. Neither do I. That's kind of the whole thing with kids. You just make your best guess and hope it's right. He paused. But Maya likes you. That's not something she gives easily. Ye osas. I like her too. She's honest in a way most adults forgot how to be. Victoria watched Maya chase Max around a tree. She asked me last week if I was sad because I didn't have any kids. She did. When? You'd stepped away to take a phone call during the board meeting aftermath. Maya and I were in the hallway and she just looked at me and asked, completely seriously, if I was sad because I didn't have a family like hers. What did you tell her, Mashal? The truth. That I was sad sometimes, but I was working on it. Victoria glanced at him. Then she said I should come have dinner with you guys sometime because her dad makes really good spaghetti, and it's better to eat with people than alone. Ethan felt his throat tighten. That sounds like her. She's right, about it being better to eat with people. Victoria stood up, brushing off her jeans. So I'm taking her up on the invitation. What night works for you? You want to come over for dinner? If that's okay. I promise I won't expect anything fancy. Maya set the bar at spaghetti, so that's pretty achievable. Ethan thought about his tiny apartment with its kitchen table covered in Maya's art projects, and the couch that was still his bed, and all the ways his life didn't match up to someone like Victoria Hale. Then he thought about Maya's face when Victoria paid attention to her, about the way Victoria had looked when she'd admitted she'd been ready to give up before they met. Tuesday, he said. Come for dinner on Tuesday. But fair warning, the apartment is small and we don't have fancy anything. Oh. Good. I'm tired of fancy. Victoria smiled. Tuesday it is. The following Tuesday, Ethan left work early from his new job at Hale Dynamics. He'd accepted David's offer after Maya had pointed out that turning down a good job because of pride was silly, daddy, and stopped at the grocery store to buy actual ingredients instead of his usual budget pasta and jarred sauce. Maya helped him cook, standing on a chair to stir the sauce while Ethan handled the garlic bread. She'd insisted they clean the entire apartment and set the table with the nice plates they never used. This is special, she'd explained seriously. Victoria doesn't probably eat at tiny apartments very much, Ma. Probably not, Ethan agreed, choosing not to mention that Victoria had offered to take them to a restaurant and he'd insisted on cooking instead. Some stubborn part of him needed her to see his life as it actually was, not dressed up in restaurant ambiance and someone else's cooking. Victoria arrived at 6:30 with a bottle of wine and a bag of dog treats for Max, who wasn't even there. I didn't know if you'd want wine, so I also brought sparkling cider in case Maya wants to be fancy, she said, producing a second bottle. And yes, I know Max isn't here, but I figured maybe next time he could come too. Next time? Ethan took the bottles, trying not to show how much those two words meant. If there is one, no pressure. But Victoria was smiling nervously, and Ethan realized this was as scary for her as it was for him. Maya rescued them both by running over and grabbing Victoria's hand. Come see my room. I cleaned it and everything. Victoria let herself be dragged away, and Ethan heard Maya giving a detailed tour of her stuffed animal collection and the drawings taped to her walls. He finished the sauce, set out the plates, and tried to remember the last time he'd been this nervous about anything. They ate dinner at the kitchen table that barely fit 3 people, elbows bumping and conversation flowing easier than Ethan expected. Maya told Victoria about her science project on volcanoes. Victoria told Maya about the new AI project Hale Dynamics was developing. Ethan mostly listened, watching the two of them together and feeling something warm and terrifying unfold in his chest. After dinner, Maya insisted they play Go Fish, which Victoria approached with the same serious focus she probably brought to board meetings. She lost spectacularly, and Maya was absolutely delighted. "You're really bad at this," Maya informed her. "I'm terrible at all card games. I have no poker face." "What's a poker face?" "It's when you can hide what you're thinking so people can't tell if you're lying," Victoria demonstrated, trying to look neutral. "See? I'm very bad at it." "You look constipated," Maya said, and Ethan nearly choked on his water. "Maya! What? She does!" Victoria was laughing so hard she was crying. "She's not wrong. I absolutely look constipated." They played 2 more rounds before Maya started yawning. Ethan sent her to brush her teeth and get ready for bed, and suddenly it was just him and Victoria alone in the tiny apartment. "I should probably go," Victoria said. "Let you do bedtime. Me. Or you could stay for a minute. I usually read her a story before bed. She'd probably like it if you were there." "Are you sure?" Maya answered for him by calling from her room. "Victoria, come read with us." They squeezed into Maya's small bedroom, Ethan sitting on the bed with Maya tucked against his side while Victoria perched on the desk chair. Maya picked a book about a dragon who was afraid to fly, and Ethan read while both Maya and Victoria listened. Halfway through, Maya's head drooped against his shoulder. By the end, she was completely asleep. Mr. Trunk clutched in her arms. Ethan carefully extracted himself and pulled the blanket up over her. Victoria stood by the door watching, her expression soft in a way that made Ethan's heart ache. They went back to the living room, and this time when Victoria said she should go, Ethan didn't argue. He walked her to the door, both of them suddenly awkward again. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Maya had a great time." "So did I. More than I've had in years, honestly." Victoria hesitated, her hand on the doorknob. "Ethan, I need to tell you something." "Okay." "I'm not good at this. At people, at relationships, at any of it. I spent the last 15 years building walls so high that nothing could hurt me, and now I'm standing here trying to figure out how to tear them down without collapsing completely." She met his eyes. "What I'm trying to say is that I like you. A lot. And I like Maya, and I want to keep doing this. Dinners and dog parks and card games, but I don't know how to do it without messing it up." Ethan thought about all the ways his life had fallen apart and rebuilt itself over the past 2 years, about how he'd lost everything and learned that survival meant accepting help instead of pretending he had it all figured out. "Nobody knows how to do this without messing it up," he said. "You just do it anyway and hope the good parts outweigh the mistakes." That sounds terrifying. Well, it is, but it's also the only way anything good ever happens. He reached out and took her hand, the first time they deliberately touched outside of professional context. "I like you too, Victoria. And I want to keep doing this, even though it scares me, even though I have no idea if it'll work. What if I'm not good enough at this? What if I hurt Maya by being part of her life and then screwing it up? What if you don't? What if you're exactly what both of us need and we're all too scared to admit it?" Ethan squeezed her hand gently. "You saved Max's life by accident that night. Maybe this time you save yours on purpose." Victoria's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I don't know how." "Neither do I. So we'll figure it out together." She kissed him then, soft and tentative and tasting like the sparkling cider she'd drunk at dinner. It was the kind of kiss that felt like a promise and a question at the same time. When they pulled apart, Victoria was smiling. "Tuesday dinners?" "Tuesday dinners," Ethan agreed. "And maybe some other days too. I'd like that." She left, and Ethan stood in his tiny apartment feeling like the world had just reorganized itself into something new and strange and full of possibility. The weeks that followed fell into a pattern that felt almost normal. Tuesday dinners became Thursday dinners too. Weekend trips to the dog park turned into weekend trips to the zoo and the aquarium and the museum. Victoria integrated into their lives gradually, carefully, always checking with Ethan before making plans that included Maya. David proved to be exactly the terrible boss Victoria had warned about. But the work was challenging and meaningful, and Ethan finally felt like he was using his law degree for something that mattered. He helped build protocols to prevent future hostile takeover attempts. He reviewed contracts and compliance documents. He occasionally testified as an expert witness in corporate fraud cases, his analysis of the North Shore documents having made him something of a minor celebrity in legal circles. The money was better, too. Not billionaire money, but enough that Ethan could finally afford a two-bedroom apartment where Maya had her own space, and he had an actual bed. Enough that he could pay his legal bills without panic and take Maya to the museum without calculating whether they could afford lunch afterward. Jessica called in January to congratulate him on the new job and apologize for the custody battle. She didn't mention North Shore or the fact that her legal fees had been paid by corporate raiders. Ethan didn't bring it up. Some things weren't worth fighting about after the war was already over. "Maya seems happy," Jessica said during the call. "I saw photos on your social media. She looks really happy." "She is," Ethan said, surprised by how much he meant it. "That's good. That's what I wanted for her. For both of you." Jessica paused. "I'm sorry, Ethan, for everything, for leaving, for trying to take her away, for not being the person either of you needed me to be." "I appreciate that. Are you seeing someone? The woman in the photos with Maya. Is that serious?" "Bobo, das saß." Ethan thought about Victoria, who'd spent the previous Sunday helping Maya build a volcano for her science project and had gotten baking soda in her hair, who'd laughed about it instead of getting upset, who'd looked at Ethan like he was something precious instead of a problem to be managed. "Yeah," he said, "it's serious." "Good. You deserve that." They talked for a few more minutes before hanging up, and Ethan realized he didn't feel angry anymore, just tired in a way that meant old wounds were finally starting to heal. Spring came to Chicago with the kind of weather that made people forget they'd ever complained about the cold. Maya finished second grade with straight A's and a ribbon for her volcano project. Victoria's company launched the new AI platform that had been delayed by the North Shore situation, and it was immediately successful. Max fully recovered and became a regular fixture at the dog park, where he made friends with every dog and human he met. On a warm evening in May, Victoria invited Ethan and Maya to dinner at her place for the first time. Her house was exactly what Ethan expected. Large and expensive, and decorated with the kind of impersonal elegance that suggested professional designers rather than personal taste. But Maya's artwork was on the refrigerator, and there were photos of the three of them on the mantel, and Max's bed was in the corner of the living room. After dinner, Maya was playing fetch with Max in the backyard when Victoria pulled Ethan aside. "I need to talk to you about something." "That sounds ominous." "It's not, at least, I hope it's not." Victoria took his hand, her palm slightly sweaty in a way that betrayed her nerves. "I've been thinking about the future, about what I want my life to look like. And the answer is this: you and Maya and Tuesday dinners and dog parks. All of it." "Victoria, let me finish before I lose my nerve." She took a breath. "I know we've only been together for a few months. I know this is fast, but I also know that I've never felt like this before. Like I have a family instead of just a company. Like I'm building something that actually matters." Through the window, Ethan could see Maya laughing as Max jumped to catch the ball. His daughter looked happy, more than happy. She looked secure in a way she hadn't since before the divorce. "I want to do this right," Victoria continued. "I want to ask Maya if it's okay. Get her permission before I do anything, because she's just as much a part of this as you are." "Permission for what?" Instead of answering, Victoria led him outside to where Maya was sitting on the grass with Max's head in her lap. "Maya, sweetie, can I talk to you for a minute?" Maya looked up, immediately concerned. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, not at all. I just wanted to ask you something important." Victoria knelt down on the grass, not caring that it would stain her expensive jeans. "You know how I've been coming over for dinners and we've been spending time together?" "Yeah, I like when you come over." "I like it too. And I was wondering how you'd feel if I came over even more, like all the time. If maybe I became part of your family officially." Maya's eyes went wide. "Like, you'd be my mom?" "But then, I'd never try to replace your mom. But maybe I could be something else. Someone who loves you and your dad and wants to be in your life forever." Victoria glanced at Ethan, then back at Maya. "Would that be okay with you?" Maya didn't answer immediately. She looked at Victoria, then at Ethan, then at Max, clearly thinking it through with the seriousness that important decisions deserved. "Would you still come to my school stuff?" she asked finally. "Every single thing you'd want me at, and help with science projects?" "Absolutely." though I'm terrible at science, so your dad would probably have to supervise. And can Max come to our new apartment? Whenever you want him to. Maya considered this, then threw her arms around Victoria's neck. Okay, you can be part of our family, but you have to promise not to leave like Mommy did. Victoria's arms came up to hold Maya tight, and when she spoke, her voice was thick with tears. I promise. I'm not going anywhere. Ever. Ethan watched them together, his daughter and the woman who'd somehow become essential to both of them, and felt the last piece of his broken life click into place. Later, after Maya had gone to bed in the guest room Victoria had started keeping ready for her, Ethan and Victoria sat on the back porch watching the stars. That went better than I expected, Victoria said. You were terrified. I was absolutely terrified. What if she'd said no? Then we would have kept going slower until she was ready. Ethan laced his fingers through hers. You know that, right? That there's no rush? That we can take as much time as we need? I know, but I also know that I've spent 15 years being alone because I thought it was safer than taking the risk. And I'm tired of safe. Victoria turned to look at him. I'm ready to take the risk. If you are. Ethan thought about the night he'd met Victoria, rain-soaked and desperate on the riverwalk, about how saving her dog had somehow led to this. A job he actually loved, a daughter who was thriving, a woman who looked at him like he was the best thing that had ever happened to her. I'm ready, he said. 6 months later, on a November evening exactly 1 year after they'd met, Ethan and Victoria stood on the riverwalk where it had all started. Maya was with them, holding Max's leash and practically vibrating with excitement because she was the only one who knew what was about to happen. Why are we here? Victoria asked, looking around at the familiar space. I thought we were going to dinner. Hey, we are, but I wanted to stop here first. Ethan took her hand, suddenly nervous despite having rehearsed this moment a dozen times. This is where I met you, where you were at your lowest point and I was drowning in my own problems and neither of us knew how to ask for help. Ethan, this is where you saved Max and where you thanked me for it even though you were the one who needed saving, where we started something neither of us planned but both of us needed. He pulled out the small box he'd been carrying all evening. This is where our story started, Victoria. And I want it to be where the next part begins too. He opened the box, revealing a simple ring that had cost most of his savings but felt worth every penny. I'm not rich. I don't have anything to offer except a tiny apartment and a daughter who sometimes has nightmares and a life that's messier than you probably ever expected. Ethan met her eyes. But I love you, and Maya loves you, and we want you in our family officially and forever if you'll have us. Victoria's hands were shaking. Are you asking me to marry you? I'm asking you to marry us. Me and Maya. All of it. The whole messy package. Yes. Victoria was crying and laughing at the same time. Yes, of course. Yes. Maya whooped and Max barked and Ethan slipped the ring on Victoria's finger with hands that trembled slightly. Then Victoria kissed him while Maya danced around them with Max, and passing joggers clapped like they'd just witnessed something worth celebrating. Because they had. Two broken people who'd found each other in the rain and chosen to be brave enough to build something new. The wedding was small, held at the courthouse with David and Sandra as witnesses, and Maya as the flower girl who took her job so seriously she counted every petal she dropped to make sure the distribution was even. Max wore a bow tie and behaved perfectly right up until the moment they said I do, when he barked once in approval. Victoria moved into Ethan's 2-bedroom apartment even though she had a house that was 10 times the size, because Maya had asked if they could all stay together, and neither of them could say no to that. Ethan kept working at Hale Dynamics, building a career that finally felt like more than just survival. Victoria kept running her company, but she started leaving at 5 instead of 8 and stopped answering emails after dinner. And on Tuesday evenings, no matter what else was happening, they had family dinner together. Sometimes it was fancy. Usually it was spaghetti. It was always exactly what all three of them needed. 2 years after the wedding, Victoria started a nonprofit legal center for single parents who couldn't afford representation in custody cases. She funded it herself and convinced Ethan to run it, turning his painful experience into something that could help others. The center opened in a small office downtown, and on the first day a young father walked in with a custody motion he couldn't afford to fight and fear in his eyes that Ethan recognized intimately. I don't have money for a lawyer, the man said. But my ex is trying to take my daughter, and I don't know what to do. Ethan pulled out a chair and gestured for him to sit. Then let's figure it out together. That's why we're here. That evening, Ethan came home to find Victoria helping Maya with homework at the kitchen table while Max snoozed at their feet. It was ordinary and domestic, and nothing like the life either of them had imagined for themselves. It was perfect. Maya looked up when he entered. "Daddy, I got an A on my English essay. Want to read it?" Of course. He sat down at the table with his family, the one he'd been born into, and the one he'd chosen, and the one that had chosen him back, and read about knights and dragons, and happily ever afters that his daughter still believed in. And as Victoria's hand found his under the table and Maya launched into an explanation of her next project, Ethan realized that Maya might be on to something. Maybe happily ever after wasn't a fairy tale ending where everything was perfect. Maybe it was just showing up every day and choosing love over fear, even when it was terrifying, even when you had no idea if it would work. Outside, the Chicago evening settled into darkness. The city lights reflecting off the river where a man and a woman had once met in the rain and saved each other without meaning to. Where two people who'd lost everything had found something worth fighting for. Where the ending of one story had become the beginning of something better. And in the small apartment filled with laughter and homework and the quiet certainty of family, Ethan finally understood that sometimes the best things in life weren't the ones you planned for. They were the ones that showed up in the rain on a Tuesday evening and refused to let you face the world alone.